Rasti u jaslama dječjim, rasti i cvijetaj zemljo radnih ljudi, i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvojim lađama napuči i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode,
Greetings, everybody, and welcome. You are here with me today for a very special episode of the program where I will be conducting a rigorous analysis of last night's truly abysmal so-called debate between the highest representatives of the bourgeois political parties. And what it does prove, however, no matter how painful this is going to be to watch, the clear position taken by those of us who hold with a thoroughgoing Marxist-Leninist analysis that the British Parliament is a joke, that the leaders of it aren't in charge of anything. This can only be confirmed by watching this debate. So we will be putting this on. We've got the video. It's about an hour. So be prepared for some truly awful stuff in the next hour or so. I've tried to work on an impression of Rishi Sunak, but he's so boring that I just can't manage it. It's Keir Starmer at least has that sort of weird, strangulated nature to his voice, which makes him relatively easy to imitate. Though if I do the impression for too long, I end up sounding like Peter Cook from the old Pete and Dud sketches from the 60s. So the Keir Starmer impression will be making an appearance. However, Keir Starmer did not do well last night. Did not do well at all. So I was thinking of an appropriate clip to play in response to his terrible performance last night. And I remembered this one from a long time ago. This is the Thick of It season 1. It's so long ago that the original lead actor is still in it, a man called Chris Langham, who was later convicted of various different horrendous sex offences. So ignore that if you can. But in this, he's getting bollocked by the Peter Capaldi character. And this is probably what's happening to Keir Starmer this morning.
Because that gives me the opportunity to... Sorry. Hi. It's mucking about. I have always maintained very clearly...
Sorry, can I just borrow the minute stuff for a moment?
Sure. Sorry.
Be right back.
Right with you.
How the fuck do you thought was going on? You stupid cunt! How am I supposed to control what's going on if I don't know what the fuck is going on? You're a fucking prick!
Angela, can I get you a fresh cup of coffee or... would you like some tea?
No, thanks.
No biscuits or anything? But do let me know if you need anything else, Angela. Thanks.
Get back in there! Watch this bullshit up!
Bit of a disagreement.
Blimey.
Yeah. Could you... I'm just curious. Could you hear... because we can be quite brutal to each other because we're actually very, very good friends.
That's an indication of the kind of day that Keir is probably having right now following the performance you're about to see here, which is truly miserable. Rishi didn't do much better, but as we're about to see, I think his tactics paid off better than Starmer's. So, without further ado, actually, before we get into it, I'm just going to greet those who are in the chat so far. So we have Banana Bender, we have Otis, we have Jawad, we have Ross, we have Yeah Well, we have Svetlana joining us from sunny Moscow, we have the suspiciously named P. Mason, who I will remain suspicious of. We have Cheesy, we have Kobe, we have Jerry, we have Tim Gray, who makes a pertinent point and says, on a serious note, after a dull week of fake opinions and media narratives that are designed to get us to think that Starmer is going to win with a landslide, is anyone noticing any real activity? Very little. There's real activity around here. I'm going to be engaging in some real political activity later in this week, but I will report back on that later on. Jenny, good morning to you. Michael says, Kang and Kodos was always a realistic commentary on politics and capitalism. Yes, The Simpsons when it was funny. Banana Bender says, a poll showed Rishi won the vote according to the crowd, 51 to 49. Yeah, I think that was the post-debate poll. Banana Bender observes that The Thick of It was better than The Office. Different kind of shows, but I know what you mean. The Office had its moments, certainly. I haven't watched the English version of The Office for fucking years, probably since it was originally on TV. I have rewatched the pick of it though from time to time, which is still very, very funny. We have Robeson, we have Marrowmine joining us from the wrong end of the Mersey. We have Clinton joining us, and Robeson joins us all the way from Jakarta. So, if you're ready, let's do this. It's Rishi and Keir on ITV. The full horror of British bourgeois politics is about to hit you full in the face. We will be pausing for commentary as we go through, so this may take a while. So, if you're ready, let's get going. Loving the melodramatic music.
It's the first head-to-head debate in the 2024 general election with these two men who want to run the country, Rishi Sunak.
Well, that's the first lie. These two are not the ones running the country. And Rishi looks about as comfortable as a man who's just realised that last night's takeaway is trickling out of his back passage.
And Keir Starmer. Well, good evening. Tonight's debate is set against the toughest of backdrops. Since the UK last went to the polls, we've had a pandemic, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and a cost.
Notice how it's always Putin's invasion of Ukraine, as if it's he alone that's done it. It's just Putin has gone over the border like some sort of fucking villain from a DC comic and has overpowered, apparently, and killed 400,000 Ukrainians. So it's a very strange... I know why they personalize it, because if you just say Putin, it's like a shorthand. It's to trigger a short burst of an emotional response in people. Putin, evil, yeah, you know, that kind of shit. But like, it's really stupid. It's like, you can tell by the way that they present things that the job of the bourgeois press, and it's becoming more and more obvious as the system slides into crisis, is to just not only bullshit you, but also keep people stupid and uncomprehending of how the world works. That's their job. So it's not that they're... When you see people like on another YouTube channel saying, oh, the media's failing. No, the media's doing what it's always done. It's just that now it's becoming more obvious that its job is to lie, is to misrepresent. Okay, so this isn't a promising start because we're only a few seconds in and we're already into the lies. Let's continue.
Cost of living crisis, which is still hitting families hard. Huge geopolitical threats loom large, not least, of course, climate change. We all know how tough it's been. We don't need the politicians to remind us.
No, we don't. We all know. These two on stage don't know how tough it's been. These two, I mean, Rishi Sunak certainly fucking doesn't. I mean, he is a rich man by his own effort, shall we say, as a scumbag City of London banker, and by marrying into one of the richest families in India. He doesn't know how tough it is. He's got no fucking idea. Keir Starmer has spent the last 20 years working his way, or I should say worming his way up the state bureaucracy on an unending expense account. He has no idea either. You couldn't pick, I mean, from opposite angles, they are the perfect personification of the current state of play in British capitalism, which is that you have, on the one hand, a guy who's completely out of touch because he worked his way into the City of London elite and then married into even more money. And then on the other hand, you have a man who has spent his life as a dedicated career-climbing bureaucrat who's not been in the real world for decades. They're perfect for this moment.
So what are these two men going to offer us? Who are they? And why should they earn our vote? Can they level with us when we know that finances are almost impossibly tight? Later tonight, you'll be able to see what other parties are offering when they're interviewed live on ITV1 by Anushka.
Don't worry, we won't be staying around for the interviews with the minor parties, who are about as important as flakes of skin off the bottom of a sock.
Astana, and the conversation will continue on the national and regional news. But now let's get on with tonight's debate. Keir Starmer, your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much.
Here we go.
This election is all about a choice. More of the chaos and division we've seen for the last 14 years, or turning the page and rebuilding with Labour. I have ambition for our country and have a practical plan.
Yeah, he's got ambition, and none of it's good. Oh, God. This is going to be a long one.
And to deliver it. I've changed the Labour Party and put it back in the service of working people. Now I'm seeking your backing to change our country, to make it work once again for you and your family.
Thank you. Rishi Sunak.
What the fuck was that? Seriously, like, what did any of that mean? Like, I've changed the Labour Party. I've changed it to make it work for you. But first of all, let's just get the most pertinent point out the way first. The Labour Party has never worked for the British working class at all. I mean that was like, so that going all the way back to the 1920s. And now, because they desperately need to try and stir up some enthusiasm, they're going back and like digging up archive footage of Ramsay fucking MacDonald. You know, the original guy who said that his job is to prove to the British ruling class that Labour could be trusted with the empire, and was notoriously repressive in terms of the clampdowns that he unleashed against the independence fighters in India. And then later went off and joined the Tories in the national government in the early 1930s. So they've been digging up footage of him. So this is, I mean, that statement was just empty. He's changed the Labour Party, yes. And bear in mind, Keir Starmer, let's just remember who he is. Keir Starmer is a man who has spent his life in service to the ruling class. He's spent his life in saluting, not in the military sense, but in the intelligence man sense, the man up the ladder from him and saying, yes, boss, I'll get it done. Oh, yeah, that's the business. And doing what he's told, whether it's the people above him in the Crown Prosecution Service, the people he worked for, probably, in the intelligence services, the people in Washington who he answers to, because let us not forget that Declassified UK dug into this, and they did a bit of investigation into his time as head of the CPS, the prosecution service here, and he made more trips to Washington than either any of his predecessors or his successors in that job did. There's no reason why the head of the Crown Prosecution Service has to go so many times to Washington, D.C. The only reason that you would do that is if basically you're their creature, and he is their creature. He's a creature of the security services, and given that the security services in this country are organically linked to the security services of the United States, he's a creature of US imperialism, because, again, British imperialism can't exist unless it exists under the wing of US imperialism. So he says he's changed the Labour Party. What he means is he's chased out any remaining elements that might have been the tiniest bit critical, certainly not in the way that we would, but in the way that even like a pacifist like Old Man Corbyn was, or like some of the other like watery hand-wringers you used to get in there, even they have been chased out. So it's absolute hardline loyalty to whatever it is the ruling class desires, either here or in the United States. That's what he says when he means he changed the Labour Party. He says he's putting it at the service of working people. I'm not sure the residents of the Pentagon count as working people, or the residents of Wall Street or the City of London. So again, he opens up with this bland phrases that mean absolutely nothing, which are designed to, again, it's designed to trigger responses in your mind. Oh, he says he's putting party above, putting the country first. Again, it's designed to trigger an emotional response. Oh, well, he must be good. He's doing something in the national interest. It's not designed to be examined, which is exactly why we're examining it, because if you examine it, it falls to pieces. Uncertain times call for a clear plan and fun already because old Rishi's trying to look tough and he just can't pull it off. It's like watching you know, this stereotypical nerd from an 80s comedy try and like go to the gym or something.
Bold action. So I'll keep this simple. In 5 weeks, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. Beyond raising your taxes and raiding your pensions, no one knows what Labour would actually do. But you know what I would do. I'll cut your taxes, protect your pension, and reduce immigration. I have a clear plan for a more secure future for you and your family.
Thank you.
I will pack your children off to fight and die in Ukraine. He won't, by the way. It's more likely that he will pack your children off to fight and die in Taiwan. Maybe. I will make sure that the City of London never has to pay the price for their 16-year-long economic depression. I mean, let's be clear. Like, that's his actual plan. However, we should say that if we're judging the opening statements, and let's judge them on what we can tell about them, Sunak's is stronger because, again, he's at least he's at least done two things in his opening statements. He's set out he attacked the opposition in clear ways, even if they're not true. And truth has no place in this debate, obviously. And he's said something that he would do. And again, bear in mind what the tactic of those who are running the Tory campaign, what their tactics are. It's not about winning. They know they probably can't win, given the way things are. But what they've got to do to retain their position in as many seats as possible is to fire up and bring back the base in the Tory core vote, the petty bourgeoisie, particularly in the southeast, some of it in the southwest and the English Midlands. They know they're not going to get very far in Scotland. They know they're not going to get very far in Wales. But if they can hang on to the core areas where the Tories have been strong, then they will be able to actually at least prevent a disaster, which is all they're aiming to do. So when he's hitting Starmer over the head with, like, you will put taxes up, he will raid your savings. I'm working on the Rishi impression. I might get it right before the end. Again, he's going to very traditional Tory attack lines that go back all the way to the days of Margaret Thatcher. And again, when they're in trouble, the Tories, the Tory leaders always do the same thing. Let's go back to our most successful recent leader. They try and do the Churchill thing. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You see, like in the old Yes Minister series, like the Jim Hacker character played by Paul Eddington, when he would be like in some moment where he would want to give off an inspiring vibe, he would like stick his hand in his jacket pocket and stand up straight and go, and we must remember at all times that we must be strong, and like starts doing like a Churchill impression. So Rishi can't really pull that off. What you can do though is you can do the Thatcher thing. And bear in mind, like the base of the Conservative Party for the last 40 odd years or so, since the Thatcher period, it's predominantly the sort of petty bourgeois in the classic sense, which is small businessmen, the small capitalists. A lot of them vote for the Conservative Party. Of course, the lower end sort of City of London types, finance guys, but principally it's a party based overwhelmingly on the petty bourgeoisie, with upper end working class votes getting in there as well. So what he's got to do is he's got to make a pitch to them. And what's the pitch? I'll lower taxes. Probably not true. Labour will raise your taxes. That is probably true. But so will Rishi. So this is the tactic. Get the core vote out, excite them, promise lower taxes, we'll stop the boats in this, completely media fueled scandal that they've cooked up over the latest immigration scare. I'm now old enough to remember at least 3 immigration scares, and each time the response is always the same. So the Sunak's strategy is clear from his opening statement. Starmer's strategy is, I can tell what it is. He's trying to present himself now in the way that Blair used to, as some sort of like unifying figure who's beyond party politics, who'll be the strong and steady hand. But it's not just, I mean, I can't stand Sunak either, but like the Starmer just, his opening statement fell flat. It was unconvincing. Rishi's also unconvincing, but at least he has a clear tactic that he's pursuing. We'll see how successful he is.
Rishi Sunak. Well, we invited viewers from right across the country to submit questions. We have independently selected the questioners here with us this evening. I'll also raise some points made by people who couldn't be here. The two leaders don't know what they'll be asked. Also here, people who'll listen to tonight's debate. Some have voted Conservative and Labour in the past and think they will do so on July the 4th. And some have voted for other parties or are undecided. You can join the debate wherever you are by using the hashtag #ITVDebate. And just before we go to our first question, a reminder that each leader will have 45 seconds to respond initially. Now, our first question on the cost of living. Paula from Huddersfield. Paula.
Good evening, both. I have worked since I was 15 years old, and at the moment I hold a full-time, stable job. My children have left home. In the last few years, I've found it very difficult to make ends meet, and the money simply doesn't go far enough. All I do is work to live. My food bill is nearly doubled. I'm in arrears with my bills. I spend my weekends batch cooking, so I don't have to turn on my oven in peak times. My savings are gone, and I'm genuinely worried about my future. I don't think you actually understand how this is for people like me. So what can you do about that?
Thank you.
Well, an actual good question. Let's see what the great inspiring leaders have to offer this woman.
Very much indeed, Paula, for your question. Rishi Sunak.
Well, Paula, I know how much of a strain the last few...
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He has no idea. I wish that he just wouldn't bullshit. I mean, I think people would have would have more respect for him if he could just admitted that he lives on a different fucking planet than that woman, and indeed 90% of the population here. He has nothing in common with her, or indeed, again, 90% of the population. He's as out of touch with them as like the feudal lords were with the serfs. But let's continue.
Years have put on your family finances, the family finances of everyone in our country.
Not yours.
And that's why my priority has always been to do what I can to support you. That started with bold action, like the furlough scheme during the pandemic, and more recently, my clear plan to bring inflation back to normal. And now, our economy is growing again, wages are rising, and crucially...
It is like being talked to by an adding machine. My God, it's like... This is why, by the way, this is why the ruling class in the United States and in Britain loved people like Obama, and they loved people like Blair, because they were better actors. Obama was a cold-blooded, sociopathic bastard who could, go to Flint and take a sip of water and pretend he was drinking the local water and stuff like that. But he could pretend to drum up some empathy. Bill Clinton, another sociopath, could do it as well. Biden isn't so good at it even before he was demented. But like, this is why they keep trying to find another Blair figure or another Obama, because you need somebody who could at least look as if they're giving a shit. He doesn't give a shit, and it's really obvious.
We are able to now start cutting your taxes. But I know you're only just starting to see the benefits of that, as you described. So the choice at this election is with my clear plan and bold action to keep cutting your taxes.
Right, new rule for this. Go and get yourself something alcoholic and take a shot every time Rishi Sunak says the phrase clear plan. Okay? Because you'll be drunk in about half an hour. Less than that. I don't think the questioner is looking very convinced, and that's entirely correct that she's not.
To give you financial security, or put all that progress at risk with higher taxes, £2,000 worth of higher taxes under the Labour Party.
Thank you, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer.
Paul, I'm really...
Well, that was a really convincing answer. Basically, he just said again his opening statement. Did you notice that? I've got a clear plan to bring down inflation and I will help you. He doesn't say how. He's basically he's leaving it to your imagination to try and join these dots together. He's trying to suggest that he's brought down prices. He hasn't. What's happened is, of course, the rate of inflation has slowed down in this country, but prices have not gone down. Just like the wholesale price of oil and gas, those prices have gone down. The price of filling up your car and the price of people's heating services is still as high as it was before. It's barely moved. So, this is the same trick that the Conservative Party especially has played for years, trying to claim that by battling inflation, the demon known as inflation, that prices will somehow come down. Of course they don't overall. So again, standard bullshit from Sunak. Let's see what the great man himself has to say.
All the treatments it normally would, and it is going to take and bold action to keep cutting your taxes to give you financial security, or put all that progress at risk with higher taxes, £2,000 worth of higher taxes under the Labour Party.
Thank you, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer.
Paula, I'm really sorry to hear the position that you're...
No, he's not. No, he's not. Keir Starmer has not felt anything since 1994.
And it must be really, really difficult on a daily basis. And there'll be millions of people watching this who feel in a similar position to you, that the cost of living crisis is really bearing down on them with constant worry. I'm not going to pretend that Ukraine and COVID hasn't made things worse, but this government...
Well, he is going to pretend. He's going to pretend that the Ukraine war has something to do with, he's going to pretend that the special military operation is what led to the rise in prices. No, it's the way in which the British government, of course, responded to that by carrying out this barrage of sanctions. That's what caused the inflationary spiral. But of course, he's not going to address that because he's in favour of the response of the British government to the special military operation. He's in favour of the previous 10 years of policy towards Ukraine. Not that he understands it. So let's continue with this misery-a-thon.
Government has lost control. Liz Truss crashed the economy. They made it worse here.
Right. Okay. This idea, I mean, I can't believe I'm in the fucking position of looking like I'm defending Liz Truss, but this is bullshit. This is bullshit. The woman who asked that question, undoubtedly her financial position will have gotten worse over the past 4 years. That's true. But the thing is, as Songs 4K says in the chat, people are bled slowly over time. So that woman's situation would have, as most working class people's situations, would have actually been getting worse for over the last 16 years, because pay in this country has been stagnating in most sectors for the last 16 years, especially in the public sector. Private sector, depending upon the industry, isn't really that much better. So there's been relentless downward pressure on the working classes' paying conditions since at least 2008, and arguably earlier, given the state of British capitalism before that, was already weakening. So Starmer is going to claim that it's all Rishi Sunak's fault. A lot of it is, but it's also stemming from a long-term problem that the last Labour government, which he is desperate to imitate, began the problem. The crisis began under them. And he is going to say nothing here that will convince anybody that he has any kind of thing to offer that will make that woman's life any better, or any other working class person's life better. But let's continue with this pathetic and undignified spectacle.
Than in other countries, and it's people like you that are paying the price, because if a government loses control of the economy, as they have, it's worth...
Right. And by the way, it wasn't fucking Liz Truss who crashed the economy. I mean, this is the bullshit that they do. Like, Liz Truss took over something which had already been stagnating for what, 14 years? So, and was already in a long depression, according to even fairly conventional bourgeois economists would call it a long depression. So this idea that it was Liz Truss is the one that crashed it. It's bullshit. I'm sure he believes it because he's been handed a piece of paper by a bunch of academics and policy advisors who tell him to say that. But it's just not true. It's been in a hole since 2008. The state of the paying conditions for the working class has been on the slide for a long time before that as well. So this is a problem which goes back to at least 16 years, arguably a lot earlier than that as well. So again, Sunak sounded like an adding machine trying to empathize and failed. Starmer this is just pure bullshit what he's coming out with here.
Working people that pay the price. And Liz Truss's advisors are in the House of Lords. She's going to be a candidate at the next election. Rishi Sunak is putting her forward. We've got to stop this chaos, got to stop the division, turn a page and start to rebuild under Labour.
Thank you.
You notice how he said nothing. He said nothing again. This is going to be a long fucking time. I hope you've all got your alcohol on hand. Though if you're in America, I realize that I am encouraging pre-midday drinking. Maybe I shouldn't say these things. But he noticed there. What did he say? Nothing. It's all Liz Truss's fault. Liz Truss's advisors are in the House of Lords. That woman doesn't care about that. Maybe it probably pisses her off that a bunch of fucking useless politicians, which include the Labour Party, have actively made her life worse. She's probably and get rewarded for it. That's very true. Most people will be pissed off about that. But I could name half a dozen more Labour politicians who've actively made people's lives worse by their actions, who are all in the House of Lords or on corporate boards right now, or who are going around supporting a genocide. Like people like John Hutton, look him up. People like, what's the other guy's name? Tom Watson, or Ian Austin, or John Mann, the professional supporters of Israel. So I can name you half a dozen others in Labour MPs, ex-Labour MPs who are in the House of fucking Lords, who are just as contemptible. So again, he doesn't say anything there. Do you notice that? Now, Sunak's response, android-like though it was, did actually have something in it. Again, he just repeated his opening statement saying that we'll keep taxes down, we've got a plan, Labour will tax you more, I've got inflation under control. So he repeated his opening statement, which is mostly bullshit. Starmer, again, just says, again, he tries to look empathetic and fails. He also says nothing. What did he say there to that woman that would actually make her think that this guy's got some kind of plan involved? He's trying to do this thing where he's sounding like, oh, I've got a plan, don't worry, I won't tell you what it is though. So he's giving no specifics. He's just trying this. He's trying to sort of look generically empathetic and saying that the Tories are chaos, I am order. But he's, again, like that woman who asked that question, and people just like her watching this, are not stupid. They'll realize he hasn't said anything. It's the Blair and Obama trick, but he's not good at it. The Blair and Obama and Bill Clinton trick is to say, oh, I feel your pain. Oh, don't worry about it. By the way, do you have a daughter? Don't worry. We're going to get it under control. I grew up poor in Arkansas. I did. I know what it's like not to have a crust to eat. That kind of thing. Or Obama's similar thing, or Blair's similar thing, where he'd do the thing with his son going, look, we need to get this situation under control. My Labour government will renew this country, that kind of shit. And it kind of worked when they did it because they're better actors. He's trying the same thing and he's shit actor and he can't deliver anything like the level of performance, but he's saying nothing.
Thank you for those opening statements, 45 seconds each. Just to turn to you first, Keir Starmer, the point that Rishi Sunak made is the economy is growing again. The plan is working, is his view.
Well, he says the plan is working. He says the plan is working. So the question for him is, why has he called the election now? Because if he thinks things are going to get better towards the second half of this year, why has he called it now? He's called it now because he knows, and I'll ask him this, he knows inflation is going to go back up. He knows energy prices are going to go back up in the autumn. That's what he's not telling you. So he says the plan is working, but I don't think he believes the plan is working, because if he thought the plan is working, he wouldn't have called this election right now.
Rishi Sunak.
I think it's slightly ironic, because from the moment I got this job, Keir Starmer was telling me, call an election, call an election. And now that we've called an election, he's saying, oh, no, don't have an election, because I don't want to tell you what I'm going to do. And this is the choice. This is the choice for everybody. The plan is working. Of course I know everyone is only just starting to feel the benefits of it, but inflation is back to normal, wages are growing, taxes are now being cut. Keir Starmer would put all that progress at risk. He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000. £2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country after all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through. That's not the right course of action. I don't know why you want to put up people's taxes.
Keir Starmer.
Paula, I just don't know how you feel when you hear a Prime Minister say, having heard what you're going through, that the plan is working, it's all right. I meet so many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world. That
could you?
Well, so do you, mate. And to draw from hang on, technical failure there. Starmer is doing it like Obama, hope, change, all garbage slogans. Yeah, he is, because he's got nothing to offer that woman who asked the question or anybody else. It's again, like, he's just going for, he's trying to generate a feeling. Again, let's go, I hate to, I'm loath to keep going back to 1997. It's the first election I have a clear memory of. And that was the thing with Blair. And again, it was easier back then because there was no, well, the only social media was message boards, if anybody ever used them. But there was no independent media. There were the bourgeois press had a complete lock on information. I mean, it's very, other than like leftist newspapers and like hand printed alternative news magazines, which very rarely got out above like a few hundred in circulation. Very difficult to get like an alternative point of view out there. So back then, it was easy to sell what they're trying to pitch now. So what they're trying to pitch now is this sort of generic feeling of change attached to Keir Starmer. That's what they're trying to pitch. And so when Starmer's giving these vague bullshit answers, he's thinking that he can do that and get away with it because the people running the media operation largely still think that it's 1997, or they wish it was. They don't know that not only is their guy not a good enough actor, but their whole tactic isn't working. Because again, the questioner was right. Her material reality, the reality she lives in, is not the same one that Rishi Sunak lives in, of course, but it's also not the same one that Keir Starmer or most of the Labour MPs live in. They're all, I mean, they're not as rich as Rishi Sunak, of course, but they're all on massive expense accounts. The MPs in this country get about, they've just given themselves a pay rise to put their pay up to £91,000 a year. Now, in dollar terms, if you're watching in the United States, what's that, like $140,000 a year? No, that ain't exactly, you know, Sheldon Adelson money. So it ain't Soros money. But bear in mind, the average wage in Manchester is about £30,000 to £32,000 a year, I think. Last time I did some research on this, so that's a whole 60 grand more. Now, and that on top of that, you get an unlimited expense account, basically. None of these people have touched the real world for years. Keir Starmer is as out of touch with it as Rishi Sunak is, and this generic garbage he's coming out with isn't going to work.
If people are struggling with their bills, why do you want to make it harder for them by saddling them with £2,000 worth of higher taxes? How is that going to make Paula or anyone's life easier?
Could you respond directly to Rishi Sunak?
This is the Prime Minister who's been part of a government that has put up tax 26 times.
You see, now that part is actually true. So we continue. So he's going to say things in here which are true. So when he says the Tories have increased the tax burden on working class people and the middle class, he's actually correct. Thing is, though, he'd do the same thing. And they're going to keep arguing about this tax burden. And so it's important to address this. The tax burden on the working class and a significant section of the middle class in this country has gone up relentlessly since the early 1980s. The tax burden's been shifted away from the highest earners to the lower and middle income earners. Now, there are some people in this who in this country who are actually earning so little that they don't get taxed at all. But they're of course not the people we're talking about here. So when it comes to tax, like Starmer's going to say you've put taxes up, Sunak's going to say you will put taxes up. They're both right. What'll happen is that, of course, what they won't say is the reason why taxes keep going up is because, of course, the burdens on the working class and the middle class, the tax burden has to keep going up because they won't go after the richest of them. They won't go after the ruling class in a serious way, but they're desperately trying to keep the state functioning. And the state resources are draining away, paying off gigantic amounts of debt, incurring more and more debt via borrowing and money printing. And of course, another gigantic burden is, of course, all of the debts that the public sector agencies carry that have been incurred. When you look at something like the NHS, that debt's been incurred because of Labour Party policies and Tory policies of basically mortgaging the assets out, mortgaging the infrastructure to private companies via things like the Private Finance Initiative. So yes, you are going to get fleeced in this country. Everybody is. If you're working class or indeed middle class, you're going to get stiffed by the tax man. But it doesn't matter whether this clown or Sunak is in charge. The tax burden on the working and middle class is going to keep going up, as it is everywhere.
Last manifesto that they had in 2019 said we won't put up national insurance. This man then put up national insurance. He's the British expert on tax rises. They're at the highest level for 70 years. And he's got the gall to say other people are going to.
I know you're going to hear a lot about the past in this election, but this election is about the future. This election is about the future, and I'm clear that I'm going to keep cutting people's taxes, as we now are. You want to put everyone's taxes up by £2,000, and this is really important. Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family. No, this is important. Mark my words. Labour will raise your taxes. It's in their DNA. Your work, your car, your pension.
Thank you. Okay,
you name it,
sorry,
Labour will tax it.
I'm just going to draw breath there a moment, please, gentlemen. We're going to be talking about tax again later on.
I just
want to bring this part of the debate back very firmly to Paula's question. She made it very clear how hard her life is at the moment. You did acknowledge it, both of you. She spends her weekends batch cooking so she doesn't have to turn her oven on during peak times. There is worry here right before our eyes that were being echoed across the country. One of the key points that Paula says is this says, I don't think you understand how hard it is for people like me. What are you going to do about it? How do you actually connect with Paula? Rishi Sunak.
He doesn't and never will, and neither will Keir Starmer. It's like ridiculous, you know? But it's like how... He can't connect with that woman. I mean, I think he probably has difficulty connecting with most people that aren't on his income level, to be honest. But I mean, it's bizarre that that they still try and do this thing of like, because on some level the media operators know very well that these people live in a completely different world. They keep trying to pretend that they can relate to ordinary people. They can't. But let's see what this idiot has to say. How's he going to relate to this working class woman who's asked him a question?
Well, I'd ask everyone to judge me by my actions. You saw what I did during the pandemic, when disaster...
You really want to go with that example? Yeah, you handed out billions to pharmaceutical companies and massive corporations, and a load of other people were left with absolutely nothing because a lot of them lost their jobs. You enabled vast transfers of wealth to the already rich, just the same way he does on everything else as well.
struck our country, I implemented the furlough scheme because I knew the impact, devastating impact it would have on people. And you know what? Every week when I'm out and about, someone comes up to me and tells me how furlough saved their family, saved their home, because that's who I am. And I don't want to put that progress at risk. I want to keep delivering financial security by cutting people's taxes.
Thank you.
Whereas the Labour Party want to keep putting people's taxes up, and that's not going to help anyone overcome the challenges they're facing.
Paula wants to know what you're going to do about it.
Yeah, well, I think what you
Starmer.
put to the Prime Minister is, how does he connect? And Paula, what I would say is this. My dad worked in a factory. He was a toolmaker. My mum was a...
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. His mother was a nurse, but his father was a petty bourgeois. His father was a small businessman. He was... So there's nothing particularly wrong with coming from a petty bourgeois background. If his father's a small capitalist, say he was a small capitalist, say he was a small businessman. Most people, like the woman asking the question, isn't going to judge because of that. But he has to try and pretend that he's actually from the working class when he's not. Now, him and Sunak actually have fairly similar class backgrounds. Like, Sunak's parents were from like the better paid end of the working class. I think at least one of them was a medical doctor. Starmer's father owned a small business. So neither of these men came from the ruling class. But they're like, Starmer's trying to pretend that he knows what life is like on the fucking breadline. No, he doesn't. He never has. But again, he's going to bullshit this woman and pretend that he does.
We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, and we were in a position on occasion where we couldn't pay our bills. So I know how that feels.
I bet that's not true. I mean, there's no way of finding this out, but I bet that's bullshit.
In our particular case, we had our phone cut off because we didn't have the money. So I do know the anguish of worrying when the postman comes with a bill. What is that bill going to be? Can I pay for it?
Are you saying
I don't think the Prime Minister quite understands the position that you and other people are in. I do want to, if I may, just answer that.
No,
let Rishi no, please let Rishi respond to that, please.
Because this...
Oh, God. Again, he has the opportunity. I mean, he's just a bad politician, Keir Starmer. He has the opportunity to actually do two things here. First of all, he has the opportunity to lay out some facts about what the last 14 years have actually done to people on the income level of the woman who has asked the question there. You know? He has an opportunity to do that. Instead of which, he goes into this fucking prolonged anecdote about my father was a toolmaker and other shit, and like, he doesn't actually take the opportunity to stick the boot in on Sunak. So there's loads of things you could say. You could just hammer the Conservatives over the fact that they put up VAT to about 20%, which is the sales tax here in Britain. So you could hit them over the head with that. Go back to the tax point. Go back to the tax point. Say if that's the way you want to run, if you want to run as the pro-business candidate, say that the Tories are the party of high taxes. It's true they are, but then again, so is the Labour Party. Like, hit Sunak over the head with that. Hit him over the head with the fact that that pay in this country has stayed still for most of the working class for 14 years. Could say something about that. Doesn't. Goes into this pathetic anecdote that isn't true about his supposedly humble origins. Yeah, he's not from the ruling class, but he's not fucking on the breadline. So he wastes the opportunity where he could attack the record of the government to just go into this pathetic attempt at empathy politics, which he's no good at. Again, he's not a good politician. He lacks the skills to do this. I mean, this guy was a lawyer. I thought lawyers were supposed to be good liars. I thought they were supposed to be performers. Wouldn't want this guy in court defending me. I'd prefer Joe Pesci from My Cousin Vinny, but only if he brought Marissa Tomei with him to win the case at the last minute due to her expert knowledge of cars.
Election is about the future and making people's lives better. Now, I've got a clear plan to ease those anxieties.
Take your drink. He said clear plan. Take a shot of whatever liquid you've got around you. Maybe cheap whiskey. Get out a bottle of Bell's, you know. Get out of bed, get a bottle of Jack Daniels if you're in the United States. Or what's the other one? Jim Beam. You'll be drunk in an instant.
That Paula and everyone is facing, because things are tough. I want to make them easier by continuing to cut your taxes. The difference at this election is Keir Starmer is going to put your taxes up by £2,000.
Thank you.
So if people are worried about their electricity bill, their food bill,
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to stop. I am going to
£2,000 worth of tax rises are not.
Right. So, Sunak is actually doing a pretty good job here in terms of what he wants to do. So he's doing a good job in terms of he's being a dick, basically, in to use the parlance of our times. He's talking over the moderator. He's talking over Starmer. And the thing is, this will work for the audience he's aiming for. What he's aiming to do, again, is like, he keeps going back to the tax point. He keeps going back to the idea that we will cut inflation. It's basically like Thatcher remix stuff. But it works for the voters, or he thinks it will work for the voters he's aiming to get out. So he's clearly been told, be assertive, don't let Starmer make his points, hit him over the head, keep jumping in, jump all over the moderator, like wave your finger, get in his face. And you know what? It's probably working. It seems it's working because Starmer's too brittle and too weak to actually respond to him. Starmer's not a strong leader. He tries to portray himself as such. But again, every single thing in Keir Starmer's career depends upon bureaucratic maneuvering, not like scrapping, not like having a serious debate, not on actually winning anything via tough political battles. Sunak is not that much tougher either, but at least he might have done some like backstabbing and maneuvering in the city of London. But Sunak is coming across as the strong one here. Starmer is trying to stay back and look statesmanlike, but he's looking very weak. So Rishi is bullying him, and it's working. So you're getting fucking bullied by Rishi Sunak. Now, for all my criticisms, and I have many, of the likes of George Galloway, like, he wouldn't let Rishi Sunak get away with that. And not even, I think, even like a character like, who I think he's an absolute criminal, like Gordon Brown, would have done a better job at like coming back at Sunak like that. See, if your opponent starts doing that, and I've had people try to do this to me in like union meetings with managers in the past, where it's a tactic that people who've got very little to say try and use. They try and talk over their opponents. They try and barrack you. And the only way to deal with it is just to barrack them straight back again. And yeah, that will make the debate basically unlistenable. But you gotta hit him back, and you gotta hit him back in the way you hit Rishi Sunak back, and the way that the way that you need to do it is the way that Keir Starmer will never take. When Sunak starts battering him with the tax thing, just turn around and say, you know who will tax? The likes of you. That's who. That's what you do. You say, why he's out of touch? Because he's a multi-millionaire. And he doesn't live in the same world as you do or anybody else does. And then you hit him with, you put VAT up, you've frozen wages, you've made sure that people in this country have paid the price for the economic crisis. But of course, he can't do any of that. And he can't do any of that because, of course, he is terrified of being hit by the ruling class and their press with the idea that he's doing class war. Because it's what they always do. If the leader of the Labour Party, and they did this with Ed Miliband, for God's sake, even just strays slightly towards mentioning the class word, the C word, then they immediately say you're a communist, you're a disgrace, you're sowing division. So he can't go there. He can't take the lines of attack that would actually work on Rishi Sunak. And because he's a very weak and pathetic man, Keir Starmer, he lets Rishi Sunak walk all over him, because Sunak has got his lines, and he's clearly been told by these handlers, go out there, interrupt, be a bit of an arsehole, get in his face, and he'll look weak and you'll look strong. And for our core vote, that will work.
Going to help
Thank
with
you
any of those things.
Rishi Sunak and
I'll
Keir
ask
Starmer.
again,
I am going to draw a line under this part of the debate. We're going to be talking about tax.
Also, the moderator's shit. She can't control Sunak. She doesn't ask. She so far hasn't asked decent follow-up questions. Like, it's like the quality of the actual job she's doing is terrible.
Again later on, and also to both of you, we'll be talking about that. Paula, thank you very much indeed for your question.
So Paula there, and I would love to ask her this if I'm passing through Huddersfield. Maybe I'll try and interview her. I would love to know what she thought of that, because if I'm asking that question, and wanting an answer, you didn't get an answer off either of these fucking clowns there. You got Sunak basically saying, I'm going to continue to do all the things that put you in the situation in the first place. And Starmer says nothing of consequence at all. So, I mean, that woman, she's intelligent enough to draw that conclusion. She knows that she's just been served up a giant pile of bullshit. And yeah, Jenny, you're right, which is that for whatever reason, maybe personal bias, I'm not sure, the moderator is letting Sunak attack and over and over again. But then again, it's on Starmer to hit back. So if Sunak's doing this, then you do it to him. You can't just let him. He's thinking he's coming across as statesmanlike. He's actually just coming across as piss weak.
Now going to go to the issue of health and social care, which, like some other issues that may come up in tonight's debate, is a devolved area. That means policies set directly in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the UK government sets policy for England. So our next question is about the health service, and it's from Janet from Telford. Janet.
Thank you. I've interacted more with the NHS lately than the average person. I'm a cancer survivor. My son is a nurse. I recently lost a cousin who was waiting for surgery. No one is brave enough to tell us the truth. The NHS is broken. Be honest with us. How long will it take to fix it?
Thank you very much indeed, Janet. Keir Starmer.
Janet, I'm really sorry to hear about your own position and that of your relatives. My wife works in the NHS in one of the big London.
Right. His wife works for the NHS as a very highly paid manager. So it's another piece of bullshitting. He's going to pretend that his wife's working on the wards or something. No, she works in a very nice office for a 6-figure salary. That's the truth. Let's see what the great leader has to say.
London hospitals. My mum was a nurse, my sister was a nurse, so the DNA, it runs through my DNA. And you can imagine just how angry I am that it's been broken, and it has been broken exactly as you describe. It's unforgivable what's happened to the NHS, and to come into power for 14 years and leave the NHS in a worse state than when you found it is unforgivable in politics. And Rishi Sunak stood 18 months ago, Janet, and said that those waiting lists, which are now nearly 8 million, he said he'll get them down. He made a promise. He said he'd be held accountable. They were 7.2 million at the time. Now they're 7.5 million. So they've gone up, and that bears down on the NHS.
Thank Rishi Sunak.
Right. Notice again, he said nothing. He said nothing. It's he's given the opportunity to open up on the area where, traditionally speaking, if you look at the polls, going back years, Labour is more trusted on the NHS because it's the party that created the NHS. So he has the opportunity there to really stick the boot in, and not only stick the boot in, but to say, I would do X, Y, and Z to improve it. But he can't. And again, it's the point has been made correctly in the comments that half Starmer's front bench are in the pocket of US private healthcare interests. Blair's was as well. And he also will not say, which Corbyn, to his credit at least, did say at the last election, 2019, he did at least say that the NHS is being sold off and we know why. But he didn't go into the reasons why. Not really. He's kind of got lost in all the other mad bullshit that was going on back then. But the reason why the NHS is in a mess, it's partially about funding cuts, but it's also about the way that it has been structured over years and years, which is, as I said before, huge amounts of money, billions every year, drain out of the NHS to pay the PFI debts that were incurred back in the 2000s. incurred under whose government? The Labour Party's. Now, to just recap what PFI is, it was the way in which the Tories brought it in under John Major. It's a way of stealth privatising state assets. So what you do is, and this the famous example is, well, there's one up the road from me. The private finance initiative built or extended hospital called Manchester Royal Infirmary that was extended massively via the usage of the private finance initiative. What you do is you get the private sector builds it and raises the money from the money markets to build it. Then they lease it back to the state on a 30-year mortgage. And so these the NHS, so as a national organisation, barely exists anymore. What you've got are these various localised hospital trusts, which are burdened with these giant debts that can never be paid off. They are there to provide an unending stream of income to the owners of that debt. And of course, the buildings are not durable. The infrastructure that was built in the 2000s, it's not durable. It was built cheaply. It will fall down within 2 decades or need never-ending management services. And of course, a gigantic amount of the support and building services, and not just the NHS, but the rest of the public sector, are all outsourced as well. The public sector has been turned into essentially a milch cow for the worst parasites in British capitalism. So the NHS is starved and underfunded. Yes, that's true. But when Sunak will say in his answer, well, I've increased funding. Yeah, but it's going to pay off debts. And they have created a staffing crisis by, of course, making the terms and conditions of both the doctors and the nurses worse, making it more expensive to become a nurse in the first place. They've done a lot of things to make it worse, but the central part of the reason why the service is failing is the enormous debts they've stacked on it, and the fact that they are using it as basically as a conveyor belt of money into the pockets of the coupon clippers. That's the issue. It's the issue that Keir Starmer absolutely will not touch, because his plan for the NHS is the same as Tony Blair's plan. It's to sell more of it off, mortgage more of it out, provide more, boost the private sector, boost the parasites who own the debts of the NHS. That's his plan. That was in the I newspaper the other day. He's going to use the same methods for funding infrastructure development as the Blair and Brown and Cameron and May and Johnson and Truss and Sunak governments have done, which is the private finance initiative. It's the same process. And the reason he cannot attack Rishi Sunak is because he has the same policy as Rishi Sunak. So he spent the opening segment of that woman's question babbling nonsense and saying some things about Sunak which were true, but he can't take the line of attack that would actually resonate with the audience because he's committed to the same policy.
Janet, thank you for sharing your story, and I'm glad that you've recovered. And I'm sorry for your loss as well. Now, my dad was a GP, my mum was a pharmacist, so I'm speaking as someone who was brought up in the NHS, surrounded by people who dedicated their lives to it. And the evenings in my house growing up, my parents spoke about how they could provide more care for their patients, like you. And that's how I think about the NHS. And of course it's difficult, and you're right, and we have to be honest about the damage that COVID has done and the time it will take to recover from that. But we've put record funding in, we're training more doctors and nurses, we're doing more checks and scans, and what I want you to know is that the NHS is safe in my hands. I will always stand up for it to give you and everyone else the peace of mind that it will be there for you and your families when you need it.
Thank you very much. Janet put this question. Keir Starmer agreed with the part of that question that the NHS is broken. Your response to that, Rishi Sunak?
Well, as Janet knows and everyone knows, the NHS is still recovering from COVID. We went through the best part of 2 years where the NHS couldn't conduct all the treatments it normally would, and it is going to take time to recover from that. But we are now making progress. The waiting lists are coming down. But what Keir Starmer didn't mention to you, which you did, Julie.
Waiting list 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. He says they're coming down, and this is the guy who says he's good at maths.
Yeah, they are now coming down. They are now coming down.
7.2 when you said you get them down. 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down. They are down, right? Yes, because the NHS was impacted by industrial action. And if it wasn't for that, 500,000 appointments would have been saved.
So it's somebody else's fault.
No, but let me address the question, because, as you said, Julie, the NHS has devolved. So different parties are responsible for the NHS.
Right, the industrial action was caused by him, by the way. The industrial action was the nurses and junior doctors who justifiably went on strike because their pay was being cut. And it led to the fact that they were worsening conditions for medical staff, led to an exodus of people from the service to go and work in places like Australia, Canada and New Zealand. And then Sunak's plan, and probably Starmer's as well, he hasn't confirmed on this, is that they're going to bring in, try and fill the gap by bringing people in from the Philippines, from India, Pakistan, Nigeria, etc. And people who are already trained, take them out of their countries, bring them over here and have them fill the gaps in the service. That's his plan. Sunak's plan, that is. Starmer's plan will be similar. So again, like Sunak is babbling on about strikes. Of course, he's going to say that Keir Starmer backed strikes. Keir Starmer has never backed a strike in his life. And he didn't back the nurses' strike. And by the way, the nurses' union leadership capitulated on that strike as well. So, and let's just be clear, it's not COVID which caused the problems in the NHS. COVID made it worse. But all the problems that the COVID period revealed were already there. They've been getting worse since, well, at least 2010. But the problems of money draining out of the service go back to the last Labour government and the way that they funded the restructuring, the way that they carried out privatisation. So this is to quote Borges, the author, the Argentine author, this is two bald men fighting over a comb, basically. And I know that's rather ironic coming from me.
NHS in different parts of the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer's party are responsible for it in Wales. Now, the NHS has been impacted by COVID everywhere, but things are difficult in England, I know that. But if you were in Wales, you would be waiting 40% longer for treatment. Ambulance and A&E times are the worst in Great Britain, and 1 in 4 people are on a waiting list. So yes, the NHS has challenges, but it has challenges everywhere, regardless of the party that's in charge.
I'm looking at Janet's response, when all the Prime Minister can say to her is that what the position is in Wales. Janet, I don't know. You may not be interested in the position in Wales. You may be interested in the position that you're facing and want a Prime Minister who takes responsibility for what he is responsible for. But what you'll get with the Prime Minister is somebody who makes a promise saying, I will be held personally responsible for bringing those waiting lists down. Yeah. At the moment they don't come down, what does he do? He blames everybody else.
Keir Starmer...
What did personal responsibility actually...
Babble. Utterly meaningless babble. Again, says nothing. Sunak lies constantly when he speaks, but he does say something. Starmer just just goes back to the buzzwords, says nothing of any consequence whatsoever. And we'll come to why he can't say anything in more depth in a moment.
Sorry, can I just intervene there and ask very specifically then, Keir Starmer, what would you do about the doctor strikes that Rishi Sunak raised? Can you answer that very directly to Rishi Sunak?
We've got to resolve them, and for months and months and months, the Prime Minister hasn't resolved them. They've been arguing about who gets in the room. You've got to get in the room, you've got to resolve it, because the NHS needs to get back to work. But we've also got to bring down the waiting list. We've got a plan.
Notice how he didn't say anything there. You've got to get in the room. What the fuck does that mean? That's almost as good as Ed Miliband's notoriously awful interview when I was first on strike, actually, as a civil servant back in 2011, where Ed Miliband, when asked if he backed the strikes, looked terrified and says, "These strikes are wrong, when everybody should be round the table negotiating." Looked like he was going to absolutely vomit and soil himself on camera. He was so terrified. So Keir Starmer, as the leader of the party of organised Labour, as the fake communists in this country will no doubt tell us, will now say, well, I'd sort it out by getting in the room. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. The government stuck to, largely, the spending limits, and the union leaders ultimately capitulated. But again, Starmer would act in exactly the same way. There's no way that he would come down on the side of the doctors or the nurses in industrial action. Absolutely no way. He would be as implacably opposed to them as Sunak is.
For 40,000 extra appointments each and every week, that's 2 million a year to bring those waiting lists down. They're at a record high. And under the last Labour government, the record was waiting lists right down, satisfaction in the NHS at a record high. That's completely been turned on its head.
OK, Rishi Sunak.
I'm really grateful for everyone in the NHS for working so hard, and we have now settled pay rises with everyone in the NHS except for the junior doctors. And of course I want to do that, to make sure it's fair and affordable though. But despite being offered the most generous pay settlement anywhere in the NHS, and indeed the public sector, the union are demanding a 35% pay rise, and I don't want to raise your taxes to pay for that, because I don't think it's right. But I will say this. So, when Keir Starmer says he'll resolve it, he hasn't explained to you how. But I will say this.
You could answer that, Keir Starmer.
Well, we wouldn't pay the 35%. We've already said that to the doctors. We can't.
So basically, he's just agreed with Sunak's position. Did you notice that? Now, Sunak is of course lying about the generosity of the offers that he's made, but when you compare it to most generous, well, that's only if you compare it to the fact that the offers to most of the rest of the public sector have been absolute dog shit for the last 14 years and weren't that good before then anyway. So again, like he got a line of applause there because you know why? He delivered the low tax line well. And what the Tories are quite adept at doing, and what Labour's terrible at doing, is they are quite adept at playing off different layers of the working class against each other. So he knows very well, or no, maybe not him, whoever wrote that line for him will know that that most people won't like the idea of their taxes going up to pay a bunch of people, that is doctors, who they think are well off anyway. So he knows how to play on that division. Starmer has just agreed with him, has no clue as to how to present his arguments whatsoever. And he's coming across as, quite frankly, rather dim.
Can't afford it because the government's already broken the economy. And there are...
Again, just the same bullshit over and over again. He won't address, because he can't address the fact the economy's been fucked since 2008. Because the model that both Tory and Labour, of course, were dedicated to crashed then and never really recovered, which is why not just that woman who just asked the question about the NHS and why she's been in trouble, but also why the first questioner was in trouble. Again, they can't address any issues, and Starmer has a particular problem because he's the leader of a reformist party, a reformist social democratic party that can no longer offer any reforms. So he's trying to do the Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Tony Blair empathy politics thing, and he's no good at it. So he looks just consistently foolish.
Many things that now can't be afforded. So we're not going to pay that. But what you can't do is what the Prime Minister has done, which is to say...
Well, you just said you'd resolve it, so what would you do?
At the end of the day...
So you're not going to give them the 35% pay rise that they're asking for, so how would you resolve it? Just standing there and saying, I'll resolve it, isn't an answer. That's not a plan.
I am loath to say it, but I have to give it to Sunak on that one. Like, he's completely outplayed him. It's all right. It's easy. It's an open fucking goal, but he's proving to be a better performer than Starmer is by quite some distance.
Prime Minister,
how would you resolve it?
Prime Minister, your record is...
Well, no. How would you resolve it? You want to be Prime Minister. How would you resolve the strike? How would you resolve them?
I wish he had as much to say when Liz Truss was crashing the economy.
Could you answer Rishi?
Again, like he keeps going back to Liz fucking Truss. Most people in the country have forgotten who the fuck Liz Truss is. She was only there for like, what, 5 or 6 weeks? I mean, we are going to do a deep dive on the removal of Liz Truss pretty soon because it's very revealing. But the reason why Starmer keeps going back to that point, actually, I'm going to move that on because that's a horrible image to pause on. That's only slightly better. But the reason why he keeps going back to the Liz Truss point is what they what he's the people who that resonates with, Liz Truss crashed the economy, over and over again, that lame one-liner he just dropped, the people that resonates with are like the tiny layer of like upper shall we say upper working class office-based professionals, and like senior managers, the people who Keir Starmer mixes with. That's who that line lands with. That's who are enthusiastic about Keir Starmer. The people with a Ukraine flag, an EU flag, and a second referendum now cry in their Twitter bios. The higher paid officialdom. That's who's enthusiastic about Keir Starmer. Those are the people who read The Guardian, people who probably like stuck a Ukraine flag on their car or something fairly early on. Now they're a bit confused about what to think about the Palestine issue. But that's his base. It's the well-paid public sector officialdom and people in of a similar income level in the media. That's Keir Starmer's base. It's not the working class at all. It's not even most of the middle class. And so the people who, if we're putting this in American terms for the moment, the people who would trust the experts, the people who would have a sign on their lawn saying, "In this house, we believe that love is love, the earth is round, climate change is real, and Ukraine is a democracy," or something like that. That sort of parody of a sort of American middle-class person. Well, we've got our own version of it over here. It's sort of Guardian readers, independent newspaper readers, people who believe everything they see on the BBC, people who would describe themselves as saying, well, I'm a nice person, and people who swallow every narrative. And as people who are most agitated about climate change, even though none of them understand it, people who are agitated most of all about the Brexit referendum, that's who his base is. And people who, when the Bank of England governor came out and basically tried to stage his coup, or successfully staged the coup of the ruling class against Liz Truss, people who were overwhelmed and delighted that this state official, this state bureaucrat, had essentially come forward and had staged a coup to get rid of the prime minister. And they're delighted about it because these are the people who believe in technocracy. They believe in rule by bureaucrat, rule by officialdom. They've absorbed it. It's in their, that is in their DNA. It's in their makeup. So let's carry on.
Point, please, Keir Starmer.
Well, I will when I can get a word in edgeways. His record.
Right, he can't get a word in edgeways because he's just been letting Sunak walk all over him because he's got nothing to say. He can't go aggressively after Sunak because he's got nothing to say. Again, he's just trying to do this whole, I'm above politics, me, you know, and it's just...
Ordered of saying, I'm not going to get in the room to negotiate. And what have we got?
No, we've been in the room to negotiate.
What have we got? Ongoing
Let him
strikes.
answer.
We have to end these strikes.
How?
The grown-up way to do that is to get in the room and to negotiate with the doctors and come to a settlement. There's only two ways forward. One is a continuing strike, which is what we've had for a very, very long time. We're now 4.5 weeks from election. He's going to kick it into the long grass. Right. Or you get grown up, you go in the room and you resolve this. That does not mean you agree with the 35% we can't afford.
Thank you.
Right, so nothing then. So basically, like, it's exactly the same position that Sunak has. So he says, I'll resolve the strike, but he says we won't pay them, but we'll negotiate. And as Sunak correctly points out, well, we are in the room negotiating with them. So again, like Starmer's implying that he'll lead the negotiations. No, he won't. He'll turn up for one of them, maybe, and then it'll be given over to the minister, and the minister will give it over to his senior civil servants. Again, absolutely meaningless drivel. Like, the idea that he's going to resolve anything is a joke. He just keeps putting forward this idea that he, by his sheer talent as this amazing statesman, is going to be able to resolve these issues. But then you actually hear the detail, and again, it's the same policy as Rishi Sunak has. So there's no difference. He's just admitted that there's no difference, you know?
But we have got to say...
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to pause that there. I'm going to pause that there, please, because I want to return to another part of Janet's question that you did touch on, that she lost her cousin who was waiting for surgery. These waiting lists are a matter of life and death. A quick point of information to both of you. If you had loved ones on a long waiting list for surgery, would you, if you felt that that was the only way forward, use private healthcare? Rishi Sunak?
Yes.
Keir Starmer?
No.
Absolutely no, if your loved one was on a waiting list for surgery?
No.
Thank you very much.
I don't use private health.
I bet he does. I bet he does. Rishi Sunak at least will tell you the truth, which is like he wouldn't go near an NHS hospital if his life depended on it. He'll probably get choppered out to some private clinic in Switzerland, or maybe he'd get turned into he'd get his memories downloaded onto one of Elon Musk's brain implants and have himself implanted in a robot body. You know, of course he'd use private fucking healthcare. Of course he would. By the way, there's different levels of private healthcare in this country. It's like there's like, for instance, our beloved monarch, King Charles the Last, got diagnosed with cancer recently. So this, and of course it would have said that he went for treatment in an NHS hospital. Now there's NHS hospitals, and then there's NHS hospitals. There's certain hospitals which are very well funded, and there's certain hospitals which aren't. And of course, if you're the king, or should we say, a prominent member of a political family, you get to go probably to the best hospital. And sometimes there's elements of, and often the private sector of healthcare in this country is built off of the infrastructure of the NHS. So where the private sector ends and the public sector begins now is rather blurry. But he's fucking lying. He is fucking lying. At least Sunak is here giving more of an open face as to who he is. This fucking bullshit artist, he'd be on the first, if he found like a broken toenail, he'd be demanding a limo to take him to a clinic on fucking Harley Street. Absolute scumbag. I'm hating him more than Sunak, which is quite something. At least Sunak's not lied about that. He's lying about many other things, but this fucking bullshit artist. I mean, the reason why I get more angry at him is because he's trying to do the empathy thing. Sunak's just come here and been an asshole, and I can respect that, you know? At least he's showing more of who he is.
Health. Okay. I use the NHS. That's where my wife works, in one of the big hospitals, as I said.
His wife is part of the problem. Let's just say this. His wife, along with the gigantic layers of bureaucracy that exist in the NHS, and there is a gigantic bureaucracy there, and a lot of it is to manage the enormous contracting out process that the NHS has. So you have this enormous bureaucracy of very well-paid managers managing this privatization process. And so, my wife works at the NHS. Yeah, your wife and all those other managers are there to essentially soak up gigantic salaries while the rest of the service withers. I'm not saying that if you got rid of all the managers and say, I don't know, had them all imprisoned on a barge that was moored in the Thames, that the service would improve. I'm just simply saying it's maybe worth a try.
It runs through my DNA.
OK, thank you. We've had the answers to that very clearly. And I just want to pause there to move on to a different aspect of the debate on the NHS. Everyone knows that fixing the NHS depends on fixing social care. 5 years ago, Boris Johnson was standing where you both are now. He told me there was a plan ready to go on this. We're still waiting. Will you both now commit to a fully funded solution in your manifesto this time round? Yes or no? Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, we've already implemented charging reform. Pilots are in place to implement the reforms. They will be rolled out later this year, fully next year.
It'll be fully funded in your manifesto.
We've already given social care an extra $8 billion because the pressures are immediate.
Thank you.
And the pilot reforms are there for charging.
OK, we heard that answer. Yes or no?
We will have a plan for social care, and like everything else in our manifesto, it'll be fully costed and fully funded. It starts with the workforce because, as you know, one of the biggest problems in social care is that the workforce is fragmented, poor conditions, and many people.
Thank you. Well, you talk about the workforce. If I could just pick up on this workforce question, because it is important, because there's no way to get Janet and everyone else the care they need without a workforce. But the British Medical Association has warned that Keir Starmer's pension tax risks an exodus of doctors. We're talking about doctors.
Right. So the social care sector is in a crisis in this country, but again, neither of these two fucking clowns are going to do anything about it. The thing again, it comes down to in this debate is like, again, Starmer, he goes back to this line, it's fully costed, and they keep fucking saying this, and I wanted just to pause as to what this means, because again, this is something that Ed Miliband did. This was a line of attack that David Cameron originally had against Gordon Brown all the way back in 2010. This it's fully costed line that they keep using. It's important to realize what this means. It means that basically they've given their plan to some it'll either be like the Institute of Fiscal Studies or like the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, which is this quango which looks at government plans and saying, oh, well, it's affordable within the current government budget, basically. It's basically this mythology that comes from like the Thatcher era, which they always put out there, which is that when Thatcher said that the government shouldn't spend any more than it takes in via taxation, it's always been a fucking lie. They always do. And by the way, then the idea that anything is fully costed anymore, when the response of the Bank of England to any crisis over the last 16 years is just to hit the electronic money printing button and pump more electronic money into the system. They don't print it anymore. It's just done on a computerized balance sheet. So this is a joke. This line he keeps using, it's fully costed, meaningless phrase. It's a meaningless phrase that appeals to precisely nobody. Maybe not nobody. Maybe it appeals to like a few like spreadsheet obsessed, like wannabe data-driven guys, as they would describe themselves as. But to the great bulk of the population, it means fuck all. It has no resonance with them whatsoever. And again, like, if this is a contest between the guy who looks as if he knows what he's doing and the guy who looks evasive and slippery and like he's constantly bullshitting, well, then Sunak's winning, because at least he's being clear in his bullshit. Starmer just looks evasive as hell because he is.
From the NHS.
We are going to... No, gentlemen, please.
It's all joined up.
Actually,
but it's all joined up, but this is an important point.
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to come on to tax very shortly. I am going to say, yes, tax will run through a lot of what we're discussing this evening. We will return very specifically to it. And I just want to stay on the issue of public services and take a quick fire on education. OK, we've had Harry, a message from Harry, who's a teacher just starting out, and Deborah, who has been a primary school head for 40 years. They've both been in touch with us to tell us effectively the same thing, that they cannot believe how bad things are in their sector. They want to know what you can do for them. Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, I think education is the most powerful way that you can transform people's lives. That was something that my parents raised me with, and I'm grateful to all our teachers for what they're doing, which is why we're backing our schools with record investment at the moment, but also reforming how we teach our kids, which is why I'm proud that right now English school children are the best readers anywhere in the Western world, and that is...
Well, that's a deeply dubious claim. I mean, best readers, I mean, if anybody from the teaching profession is watching, maybe you want to contribute on this one. Best readers in the Western world. Readers of what? Like, if I had to guess, because I need to do more research on this, I'm going to guess that, like, they've put some new test in place, like saying, can the 4-year-olds recognize the letters of the alphabet or something by a certain stage, or it'll be some new reading comprehension test which doesn't actually, or some new reading test which doesn't actually test the child's ability to read and understand words, but looks as if it does. It'll be some bullshit metric, you know, that they're using. So that claim, very dubious, but we can...
Testament to the hard work of teachers and the reforms of this Conservative government.
Well, there's a pattern here, isn't there? We've just been talking about the NHS and Janet says it's broken. We've now gone to education and the teachers say that's broken as well. And I know the Prime Minister has already said in the first however many minutes of the debate that he doesn't want to have anything to do with the last 14 years. I'm sorry, Prime Minister, you may want to just cast it off, but everybody else is living with it. When it comes to schools, we desperately need more teachers because in secondary schools, we do not have the teachers we need. So, for example, on key issues like maths, we have maths being taught, and parents watching this will know, by supply teachers, by PE teachers, but not maths teachers. So we would have in place, one of our first steps would be to recruit 6,500 teachers to fill those gaps, which will help the existing teachers who are struggling to cope with the mess that this government has left them in.
So tell Rishi Sunak why you're going to raise VAT on private schools to achieve the money that you say you will spend on those extra teachers. Why are you making that choice? Tell Rishi Sunak.
Because I believe every child should have the teachers they need in the core subjects like maths. And I think for a child in a state secondary school who doesn't have a core teacher in something like maths is going to live with that for the rest of their lives. It's not a one-year problem or a two-year problem. If they're in their GCSEs, it's for life. And therefore, we will have 6,500 recruits. Okay. We will get rid of the tax break on private schools to pay for it. That's a tough choice. I do understand that. Yeah. It's a tough choice.
Rishi Sunak.
But I want to make sure that children in our secondary schools get the chances that they need.
You've explained the policy. Thank you. Rishi Sunak, if you'd like to respond directly to Keir.
I don't agree with it, because I think people who work hard and aspire to provide that education for their kids should have that freedom. That's what my parents did, and I'll support it. But you heard it. Keir Starmer is going to raise taxes. But that's just the start, because there's a long list of other things that he needs to find the money for. So it's not just going to start and stop there. There are £2,000 worth of tax rises coming for every working family in this country. And as I said, he's saying to you he's going to raise taxes.
I do need to
that's not the start, and that's not the end.
I do need to answer that because he put that figure out there. Well, what's happened here is, it's a classic. They put in pretend Labour policies to the Treasury and then they get a false readout. So I'll just tell you, what they've put in for this analysis is a mental health policy that isn't the Labour Party's policy. He's put in one of his own policies. He's asked the civil service to cost it, and they've come up with this figure of £2,000. They
are an independent civil service.
I think in terms...
put it twice, I do need to deal with
Gentlemen, please, may I just say that people can have a lot of figures to get their heads around tonight. I'm not saying that people are more than capable of calculating that rapidly at home, but I do want to actually draw the focus then, given we're on this patch, very specifically onto the question of tax. I want to talk very specifically about tax before we finish this first half of our debate. Can we clarify the similarities in your positions? Please raise your...
Yeah, the similarities are glaringly obvious by this stage because they're bickering about marginal shit. Again, like, this is an abysmal performance from Keir Starmer. Like, it's... You can argue, I think with some justification, that the moderator has not been doing her job properly, but he's just, again, like, I'm staggered at how bad he is and like how anybody could get invested in this clown. Seriously. I mean, it's, then again, I suppose there are some Americans who are invested in Joe Biden, so maybe I should lower my expectations of certain people. We continue.
Your hand if I am wrong. You, as Prime Minister, will not raise income tax. You will not raise national insurance in the next Parliament. And other than Labour on private schools, you will not raise VAT. Thank you for that instructive moment. We've had a lot of viewers getting in touch to ask, where is the money coming from to solve the huge challenges to solve...
Right, the money is basically irrelevant at this point because, like, everything they've said to you so far is like giant crocs of bullshit, essentially. They're, again, like, when the British ruling class want to find the resources to fund something like, say, endless military equipment to be dumped into Ukraine, they'll find that because it's a worthy investment of state funds. When they need to bail out a bank, they'll just create the money on a balance sheet to do it. I mean, this is where... I'm no advocate. In fact, I reject modern monetary theory. But what is true about what the MMTers and Keynes before them said is that when a state like Britain wants to actually do something, when they actually want to fund something, because Britain's the oldest capitalist nation, the oldest imperialist nation, has like £4 trillion going through the City of London every single year, has some of the biggest corporations in the world registered here, though not doing business here, but registered here. Like, that's an awful lot of capital that they've got access to, and it's an awful lot of borrowing that they can do, because essentially the people who run the money markets, the people who, the big capitalists, the people who own the important stocks, the important shares, the important land in this country, the ruling class, they are still convinced that the British government is good for it, basically. So if you're considered to be a good bet, then there's no real limit to the amount of debt you can rack up, in theory. This is the big problem, though. There is a limit to it. The limit is that eventually even the ruling class are going to lose faith in the system, and they're going to lose faith in it because part of what keeps the plates spinning in this country, and as Two Sugar says, it's 4 trillion a day that goes through the City of London. Part of what keeps the plates spinning is the belief that the big money men have that the British government can still essentially carry on its work as an imperialist power. That's what inspires the faith, shall we say, in that the ruling class has. It's what makes British government debt still something which people want to purchase, is the belief that if you invest in British government debt, the British government is still something which is viable as an imperialist power. It's still able to despoil and hyper-exploit large areas of the world. It's still got some of the biggest corporations in the world. You're still able to get a good return investing through the City of London. All of this is what makes up the collective faith that the ruling class have in the British system at the moment. That's why there is the ability to print or create unlimited amounts of money when they need it. It's because the ruling class still think this is a good bet. Britain is a good bet. So this is the ugly reality which neither these two dickheads nor the moderator nor the entire media are going to tell you. The investment in the unending brutality in Ukraine, the investment in the unending slaughter in Gaza is all part of keeping British imperialism on the rails, and it's looking very wobbly at the moment. So they will continue to pay large amounts out to fund the continuation of both of these murderous wars, which the British government ultimately stands four square behind, because this is all part of keeping the British imperialist show on the road. That's not going to be part of this debate, though.
The huge challenges raised by Paula, Janet and many others. Are you two gentlemen being honest?
We will raise specific taxes, and we've been really clear what they are. We've already dealt with the tax break on private schools. We want to end the non-dom status completely. I think that the super rich should be paying their tax. I want to get rid of the equity loopholes that are there, again, for the super rich. And I think the oil and gas companies should be paying their fair share towards our energy. So we will raise those, but we won't raise the others.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, we have already scrapped the non-dom regime and we have a 75% windfall tax
You've left a
on
loophole.
energy companies. But independent Treasury civil servants have costed Labour's policies, and it's £2,000. But you asked the specifics,
nonsense.
Julie. So let's have a specific difference.
Please let
I've
Mr Sunak
announced
finish.
the triple lock us, so that we raise the personal allowance for pensioners and ensure that the state pension is never subject to tax. That's what you'll get under a future Conservative government. Keir Starmer hasn't matched that plan.
Just to say, on a matter of stylistic sort of techniques here, Sunak is dealing with, when Starmer tries to interrupt, Sunak deals with it in the correct way, which is that he just carries on, which is what you've got to do. Starmer gets knocked off his game, which is, again, very strange for a lawyer. You would have thought, I mean, I knew a lot of lawyers back when I was at university. They're constantly doing things like debates and what they call it, moots and stuff like that, where they train themselves in delivering arguments. This man is terrible at delivering an argument. He's terrible at even interjecting. And Sunak is very easily talking over him. He's very, again, he radiates weakness, indecisiveness, uselessness. and it'll be fatal to him.
Which means for the first time in our country's history, if Labour are elected, pensioners will pay tax. I do not think that is right, and you should explain to everyone why you think pensioners will be paying a retirement tax under your government.
Briefly, please,
What the Prime Minister's done so far in the 2 weeks of this campaign is to make desperate gimmicks and put them on the table. He's told us it's their policy to get rid of national insurance altogether. That's £46 billion. He said it's their policy to get rid of inheritance tax. That's £10 billion. He says he's going to get rid of tax on pensioners.
You're just talking nonsense. But just answer the specific question. We have committed, I can tell you...
Thank you, not over each other. Thank you, not over each other.
No, but we've committed to the Triple Lock Plus. Under us, the state pension will never pay tax. Under you, there's a retirement tax coming for British pensioners. I think it's appalling. Explain to people, why do you think pensioners should pay tax on the state pension?
OK.
Again, like, if I actually was a Labour Party supporter, I'd hate Keir Starmer even more. Because, like, he's just been completely bulldozed by Sunak over and over again. Yes, the moderator's letting him do it, but he's clearly, this is a man who cannot be assertive in the slightest. How on earth, I mean, other than by, you know, arse licking and the usual techniques, he managed to oil his way up, ooze his way up the greasy pole to the top, when he's quite plainly a man who is an absolute dickless wonder. He's a fucking eunuch, and an intellectual eunuch at that. Complete weakling, completely unable to actually combat anything that Sunak is saying to him. Useless with a capital U. Totally exposed by this debate.
TV debate. The first half was dominated by the cost of living and public services. Just a little information for both of our candidates here. Please, an appeal from me not to speak over one another. We want to make sure that everybody can hear what you're saying. That was a gentle reminder. It may not be so gentle next time. We now turn to another important issue in this election, and that is immigration. And our next questioner is Stephen from Warrington. Stephen.
Thank you. Politicians have broken so many promises on immigration. Why should I trust either of you to do anything about such large numbers of people risking their lives to cross the channel to gain access to the UK illegally?
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Rishi Sunak.
Stephen, immigration is too high. We will need to take bold action to bring it down, whether that's legal migration, where we're going to introduce a new legal cap to guarantee that it will come down every year, or the boats, which you mentioned, where we got the numbers down last year by a third, and now we have a deterrent ready to go. Migrants have been detained, the flights will go in July, but only if I'm your Prime Minister. If Keir Starmer's elected, all those people will be released, the flights will be cancelled, and we will have no deterrent to stop the unfairness of people crossing in boats. So that's the choice for you at this election. Stick to our plan, and illegal migrants will be on those planes. With Labour, they will be out on our streets.
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer.
Well, Stephen, the levels of migration are at record highs. 685,000. It's never been that high, save in the last...
And why is that, Keir? Why is it that record numbers of people are uprooting themselves, as the questioner indicated, risking their lives in many cases, to come to places like this? Why is it that mass waves of migration have increased over the last 10 to 20 years? Could it be, perhaps, that in many areas of the world, British and American imperialism has destroyed and ravaged whole areas to leave people with no choice but to up sticks and leave? Certainly the case in Libya, certainly the case in Syria, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan. So again, Keir's not going to say that. Rishi's not going to say that. So that's the one big factor as to why. Another big factor as to why, when it comes to the mass migration out of sub-Saharan Africa, is that the reason why so many people are leaving those countries and have done over the years is because these countries have been, until fairly recently, in the cases places like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, possibly Guinea, possibly Chad joining this group as well. It's because these places are neo-colonies, often of French or sometimes British or American imperialism, where they are robbed blind every single year via the neo-colonial system that was first analysed as it was beginning by the great Kwame Nkrumah. And the fact that even if it's not a direct war, neo-colonialism can ravage and destroy a country as efficiently as a war can. If you look at the places where people flee from, in places like sub-Saharan Africa, you can see the effects of a war on a place like Niger. On a place like Niger, which should be rich because it's got vast amounts of uranium deposits, you've got the benefits of that, having that natural resource drain out of the country and go over to France. Same is true for the industries of Burkina Faso, of other places where there's large-scale migration come out of. And of course, there is the wars in these countries, which, even though Britain and the United States are only tangentially involved in some of them, they're very much involved in the background in fueling the supposed jihadist rebellions, which strangely enough the French troops could never quite bring under control, because they were never meant to be brought under control. They were meant to be ongoing wars which would justify long-term deployments of imperialist forces. So all of these are the background reasons as to why vast numbers of people are upping and moving around, and they're not going to address either of those things, of course. The other reason is, of course, that the British capitalist class has an insatiable and unending need for cheaper labour. You saw this earlier in the debate when they were both talking about, oh, we're going to recruit more staff for the NHS. Does that mean they're going to be investing more in training them from scratch? That's not where the bulk of them are going to be coming from. They're going to recruit many, many thousands of people to bulk out the numbers of people in the NHS from overseas. That's what they're going to do. They're going to raid other countries' skilled professionals and bring them over here. And that's just one aspect of it. Then you have the so-called question of illegal immigration. Capitalists love illegal immigration. They always have done. I mean, in the terms that it happens here, a lot of people come here and they're declared to be illegals. They of course get work. A lot of them work in agriculture, doing the jobs that used to be done by migrants from often India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, like 50, 60 years ago. Before them, it was roving gangs of Irish labourers used to do a lot of the hard agricultural work. You get a lot of migratory people from Southeast Asia, from sometimes from China and other places turn up over here, or people of Chinese origin turn up over here doing these agricultural jobs. A lot of them are declared illegal workers, but strangely enough, the state never seems to be able to stop them. Why? Because the capitalist class wants those workers. They need ongoing mass migration into the country, both legal and illegal, to keep profits high, because you can better exploit somebody who's just turned up and he's worried about his or her status. That's the truth. And that's the reason why neither of these people will actually bring the migration numbers down. They won't. Because, you know, being in my early 40s now, I can remember previous supposed debates on migration. And I can remember the same lines being said by the same political parties 20 years ago. I remember the Labour Home Secretary at the time, an absolute fucking scumbag by the name of David Blunkett. And he would babble on and on about, like, he was from Yorkshire, so you'll permit me another impression, even though it's probably not something the American audience is going to necessarily get. Blunkett would go, well, listen, we're going to get an handle on this mass migration thing. We're being swamped. We can't take it anymore. That was his usual. He'd write these like fire-breathing columns for the Murdoch press, you know, about how we've got to stop the migration. I've got a plan. I'm going to do it. He later admitted quietly that there was no upper limit that he would ever put on migration. Why? Demands of business. He later admitted in his wretched autobiography, which I think I must be one of the few people who actually read it, that he would routinely stage controversies in the Murdoch press in particular over migration. So there would be a dance carried out between the Blair-led Labour government and the Murdoch press, typified, of course, by the Sun, which you may be familiar with. And the Sun would run on the Monday morning a headline, "Immigration out of control." That's how you got to do the voice when you're doing a Murdoch press thing, because that's how the Murdoch press wants to sort of convey itself. Is it? They always do this fake proletarian thing. Though if I'm being honest, I should probably declare it and say it more like this: immigration out of control. But they would lead on the Monday with that, and they would ramp up the campaign on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday, Blunkett would come out with a policy. On the Thursday, he'd give an interview to The Sun. On the Friday, The Sun would say, Blunkett takes bold action, and Blunkett would be there going, "I've decided that I'm going to clamp down. We're going to have a machine gun nest on the White Cliffs of Dover and shoot people as they get off the boat." Usual thing. So it would be a fucking dance between the government and the bourgeois press each week. And this is still happening now. Every time there is this scandal, it is a dance that is being conducted for you. It's not information. It's scaremongering, race baiting, and entertainment. The dance is going on between the politicians and the hacks in the bourgeois press. They are basically making sure you are entertained and periodically enraged, and you get emotional and you think about how much your life sucks, and they give you somebody to blame. But in reality, behind the scenes, British capitalism steps in and says, well, you know what, Keir, better not put any limits on the migration patterns, otherwise, profits might be in danger. Need those people for agriculture, Just tell the proles you've got it under control. Put some of the Albanians on a boat and send them to Saint Helena or something like that. This is the game. And the game always concludes with more securitization, more things like armed enforcement wings. One of the things Starmer's going to say here is like, I've got a plan. It's going to be, I'm going to put a new immigration directorate, more authority than ever, deport more than ever. What he means is it's going to be followed like the American system. Like, think of the American system. Border militarization starts, and it goes on in waves. But the modern era, post-91, let's start it from there, starts with Bill Clinton, Bill and Hillary, and the Democrats, and Joe Biden, talking about border militarization in the 1990s and militarizing the border. Then you get a further wave of militarization with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Custom Enforcement, the notorious ICE. And what's that used for? What's it actually used for? It's not used to do the mass deportations that some of the characters involved in the Trump movement dream of. It's used to terrorize the migrant workers who were already here, already there in the United States. And Starmer's plan will be the same. This new immigration directorate that he's been talking about will be used to terrorize those who are already here and make sure they're kept quiet. It's to discipline the workforce that is already here. That's what it's about. It's not about cutting down on the numbers. Firstly, it's a performance to make you believe that they're giving a shit, when in actual fact the only thing they're doing is protecting the profit margins of business, and they're doing that by making sure that the migrant workforce that needs to be brought in to meet the needs of capital is continually terrorized. That's where this leads. So all this shit that they're talking, it's entertainment, it's a stage, it's theatrics, and they admit to it when they're safely retired and ensconced in the House of Lords, as Lord Blunkett these days is.
Last year or two, the Prime Minister says it's too high. Well, who's in charge? Who's in charge? He's the most liberal Prime Minister we've ever had on immigration. We've never had numbers like this before.
So this is the debate that you're having. I'll be tougher. No, I'll be tougher. Again, they're both bullshitting you. Don't fall for it.
And he says that you can believe him on the boats. Nobody should be making that crossing across the channel. 18 months ago, the Prime Minister made a promise. He said, just like the NHS promise, he was personally accountable for it, that he would stop the boats. This year alone, 10,000 people have crossed on boats. That's a record number. So again, he's made a promise and he's completely failed to keep it.
Thank you. Rishi Sunak, respond directly to Keir Starmer.
Yeah, over the last 12 months, the number of crossings have down a third because the plans we put in place are starting to make a difference. But the choice of this election is about the future. I believe you need to have a deterrent. The only way to stop this problem is to say to people who come here illegally, they cannot stay and they will be removed. If I'm your Prime Minister, the planes will go to Rwanda, we will have a deterrent. So the simple question for Keir Starmer is, what will...
Well, if it ever gets going, then he'll be providing Paul Kagame with a slave labour workforce. Really humane stuff there, Rishi. But then again, what else would you expect in a debate between a lawyer and a banker?
You do with people who come here illegally? What will you do with them?
Well,
very simply, what will you do with them? That's what I'm going to do. We'll have a deterrent. What are you going to do?
We need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, making a huge amount of money, putting some of the most vulnerable people in boats.
Right, it's not the fucking gangs. This is another thing. It's not like the people who come here, as I think it's Kobe who says in the comments, like most of them aren't coming over in a fucking boat. That's just the the drama they put in front of you. Yeah, a lot of them are arriving on a plane. They're going through the legal process. Like the boat thing is a fucking massive distraction. They're the people who are the most desperate out of all of them, who are trying to float over here on a fucking dinghy. But most of them are arriving in the traditional way that you would arrive in this country. But maybe they'll come on a ferry. Most of them will come on a plane. You know, it's ridiculous to claim that the whole thing's being run by, what, people smugglers? Well, who are the most efficient people smugglers in the world? It's probably people who work for MI6 and the CIA. This is a farce. This is a farce. Like, and these two idiots and con men are trying to like bring you along with this fairy tale that they are telling you. And it's just complete garbage. And you only need to be able to remember through the last couple of immigration scandals to learn to know what manipulation is being engaged in here. It's like they want you to have the memory of a fucking of a mentally disturbed goldfish because that's the only way you could fall for any of this.
Across the channel. They're making a fortune. Before I was a politician, Stephen, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and I worked with the police and prosecutors in other countries to bring down terrorist gangs who are running across borders. I do not believe it's impossible to bring down the...
Were those terrorist gangs actually working for MI6, Keir? Because a lot of them were.
These gangs. What I won't do is engage in an expensive gimmick, the Rwanda scheme. If he believed it was going to work, he wouldn't have called an election before it can be tested. He wouldn't have done it.
So, Keir Starmer said, smash the gangs. We put new laws in Parliament that have now led to almost 1,000 criminals and people smugglers being arrested, serving hundreds of years in jail. Because we do need to smash the gangs. Keir Starmer voted against those laws. So, as ever, you say one thing here, but your track record says something completely different, and you can't be trusted to tackle immigration.
So why are the numbers this year 10,000 record numbers? Why is that?
Because this is a challenge. This is a growing challenge, but I've got a plan to deal with it because I'm going to put people on planes. What are you going to do with them? I can tell everyone what I'm going to do. You might not like it, but I've got a plan because we've got to have a deterrent. What are you going to do? Just tell everybody. What are you going to do with illegal migrants who arrive?
Please, can we please, gentlemen, we will lower our voices. Keir Starmer, please respond directly to Rishi Sunak.
There's a pattern of behaviour here. He said he would get waiting lists down. They've gone up. He said he would stop the boats. We've got record numbers coming. The promises he makes are not worth the paper they're written on. His plan is failing. We do have to deal with this problem, Stephen. We absolutely have to deal with it. We have to smash the gangs that are doing. I will never accept that the only criminal gangs that can't be taken down are these vile gangs. I've taken down terrorist gangs in my past.
What is he, fucking Jack Bauer? Is this the way he's trying to sell himself now? I'll take down terrorist gangs. You know, most of the terrorist gangs who operate in this country operate under the guidance of the security services. Most of the ISIS men, the Al Qaeda men, you know, the ones that the MI6 sent to go and fight in Libya and Syria. Are those the terrorist gangs you're thinking of, Keir? Or are you pulling a Robert Mueller on us here? You're naming the people like you, like using the American method, where like you'd put an informant into a mosque find a mentally disabled guy and con him into proclaiming that he's going to do a terrorism on a mic. You know, I think that's the kind of thing that Keir Starmer was actually fucking engaged with. I've taken down terrorist gangs. What is it? This an episode of fucking 24? You know, does he think he's Kiefer Sutherland? You know, has he read too many Tom Clancy novels? I've taken down terrorist gangs. Fuck off. You know, he's like, this is a man who's a servant of the British security state. The British security state employs the terrorist gangs. This is worse than I expected it to be. Even worse. Fucking hell.
Seen how it's done. I know it can be done. We'll have a border security command if I'm Prime Minister, and we will get that done and stop this vile trade and those boats coming over with.
Right, there you go. That's his actual policy. His actual policy is to have a another bit of bureaucracy, another section of a new element of the state forces, which will be used to terrorize existing groups of workers. That's what it'll be used for. Everything else he just said is a giant stack of fucking bullshit. I'm sure he believes it because he's just a functionary. He's not making decisions. He's a fucking eunuch of the brain and a man who has spent his entire career saying yes, sir, to the man above him in the chain of command. Now he wants to say yes, sir, to the entire ruling class. Fuck this guy, seriously. And the vile trade that he keeps denouncing. Well, here's a question for you, Keir, and Rishi as well, considering that Rishi is allegedly the Prime Minister. Well, what about the vile trade in, shall we say, women and children that runs out of Ukraine, that runs out of Kosovo, and that runs to Israel? What about that vile sex trade, Keir and Rishi? Are you going to say anything about that? No, I don't think so, because the vile trade in human beings and drugs and weapons runs from British and American protectorates and puppet states. That's a vile trade, and it's a vile trade that they are never going to stop, because in terms of trades in human beings or narcotics or anything else, there's nobody who's been doing it longer and been making more money out of it than the British ruling class. Seriously, fuck this guy.
Very vulnerable.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to call a pause there. Thank you very much. A very specific question to you, if I may, Rishi Sunak, and that is on the European Convention on Human Rights. If your Rwanda plan is blocked by the courts, and will this appear in your manifesto, that you would remove the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights? Is that part of your plan? Will that be in your manifesto?
I'm crystal clear. I believe all our plans are compliant with our international obligations, but if I'm forced to choose between securing our borders and our country's security or a foreign court, I'm going to choose our country's security every single time.
So that's a yes. Excuse me, can I be clear? That is a yes.
I've been crystal clear. I will choose our country's security ahead of membership of a foreign court every single time.
Very, very clear answer. Keir Starmer, respond to that directly to Rishi Sunak, please.
No, if I'm Prime Minister, we will not pull out of international agreements and international law, which is respected the world over. Because I want the UK to be a respected player on the global stage, not a pariah.
It already is a pariah. The British government is supporting a genocide in Gaza and has been supporting a mass slaughter of Ukrainians in, of course, the Ukraine war. So if it's not a pariah already, it fucking should be. It fucking should be. Absolutely disgusting pair of cretins.
Who doesn't agree with international law, and those laws were put in place after the Second World War, after the horrors of the Second World War, when all governments, all countries came together and said, never again. And it was a Conservative government. Churchill's fingerprints are on this instrument, so important.
Be careful when you're talking about Churchill's fingerprints, Keir. They're on a lot of other things as well. My God. Yeah, the world came together and said, never again. Did it? Because never again disappeared pretty quickly. Never again, it was never applied to, shall we say, the French murdering tens of thousands of people, ultimately, 1 million in the Algerian War. It was never applied to the Dutch when they tried to hang on to Indonesia. It was never applied to the British when they were slaughtering Kenyans and Malaysians. It was never applied either when the Americans and the British were backing a fascist insurgency in the Soviet Union inside Ukraine, backing the ancestors, the very same Banderists they're arming and funding in Ukraine now. Wasn't actually applied to the very foundations of the State of Israel, which Starmer and Sunak are in complete agreement on. They need to defend it. When they did mass population expulsions and mass slaughter of civilians in 1948. So never again was always bollocks. The only nation that actually meant it was the USSR, not any of these countries, because they immediately reverted to the very behaviour that they'd been engaged in beforehand. And by the way, the people who really opposed the Nuremberg tribunals and the setting of international standards regarding human rights, the people who opposed that the most were people like the British military hierarchy, who didn't think that you should put senior German officers on trial at Nuremberg, because they knew very well that some of those things that the German officers were accused of, you could just as easily accuse an American, a French, or a British general of. So this fucking attempt at moralizing from this fucking clown is bullshit. At least Sunak's being an open bastard, you know?
Was it for the Conservative Party? And this Conservative Party is 1,000,000 miles away from the Conservative Party of old.
I have a direct question to put to you, Keir Starmer. You sound quite similar, just to confirm for both of you, on the issue of safe routes. Are safe routes for people crossing the Channel not the answer, Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't think anybody should be crossing the Channel. In relation to some countries, I do agree with safe routes. So, for example, well, just give me the example, Afghanistan, where everybody will observe the terrible scenes when the Taliban took over, and people risk their lives to...
Those would be the terrible scenes that were created by the US imperialists. Next to the US imperialist occupation, which, by the way, was an occupation that was enforced by drug gangs and shall we say, sex criminals. That was the occupation of Afghanistan, and the reason why people are fleeing Afghanistan now is partly because some people don't want to live under the rule of the Taliban. Can't really blame them for that, but also because the US is still trying to sanction and starve Afghanistan into submission. Keir's not going to mention that one though, because he agrees with all of that. These people are monsters, by the way. If you haven't, I'm sure you as an intelligent audience have worked this out yet. These are a pair of monsters. The woman questioning them is also a monster. Why? Because the British ruling class are monstrous, and they always have been. And by the way, Keir's claiming, the Conservative Party is 1,000,000 miles away from Churchill's party. No, you're still the same. You've just degenerated. Churchill was just a more talented bastard than Rishi Sunak is. And, the likes of Ramsay MacDonald was a more eloquent bastard than Keir Starmer. But they're just the same. These are dedicated servants of British imperialism. They are both drenched in blood. They are both monstrous characters serving a monstrous ruling class, and get used to seeing them for what they are, which is as blood-soaked criminal scum. That's what's on screen in front of you with these two guys.
For our forces, etc. I thought they should be allowed to come here to safety, and I supported the safe routes for them to do so. There are circumstances where I do believe that's the right thing to do. Ukraine is another example.
We just need to keep this brief. Yes or no to safe routes for those crossing the Channel?
We should have safe routes, but when we've controlled our borders, we will be able to have a conversation about the right number to accept. We've been a very generous, compassionate country, but we talk about European conventions. 20 European countries almost now have agreed with my approach. Believe that you need to be able to return people to a safe country, otherwise you can't solve this problem. We still haven't heard from Keir Starmer, and this is meant to be a debate about the future. I will put people on planes to create that deterrent. Multiple other European countries agree with that. What will you do with illegal migrants who come here? What will you do with them?
Well, would you consider processing asylum claims in a third country, Keir Starmer?
Yes, if that was possible to do it in compliance with international law, of course. But just let me deal with this, because...
So you do now agree?
Okay, so you...
now, you've just changed your mind
we were not going to talk over each other.
You do now agree with third country deals?
Thank you very much.
Could I just get a word in edgeways?
Mr Sunak.
Right. Weak. Can I get an word in edgeways? No one responds well to that. Weak. Just got to call it what it is. Sunak's winning by a long way as well. Yes, everything he said is appalling, but he's saying it better.
Mr Starmer.
At the moment, people are arriving by small boats and not having their claims processed. By the end of the year, that means there'll be 100,000 people in hotels at taxpayers' expense who are not having their claims processed. That means one thing: they cannot be returned. And that's why returns have gone down by 40% on his watch. Now, he'll say again, well, don't look at the last 14 years. I know that was terrible. Don't look at that. I'm just looking forward. But I'm sorry, we're all living with the consequence of your awful decision.
Right. Thank you. So, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for that. We are trying to get as many topics in. Thank you. No, thank you. I'm just going to draw a line under that. We are just trying to cover as much ground as possible. I'm sure you both understand that. Thank you. We're going to turn now to our fourth question from Omar from Manchester. Omar.
Thank you. I'm worried about the UK's lack of leadership on the world stage. I want our PM to be strong enough to take a stand even when it's hard. So what should happen next to stop these awful scenes we're seeing in Gaza?
Thank you very much indeed.
Ooh, a question that comes from the real world. Let's see how the great leaders respond to this. Video's gone haywire, so I'm just going to have to try and find this again. And bear with me a moment. This is the danger when you're trying to run things through here. Okay.
Ceasefire, a cessation of the hostilities straight away. And for these purposes, which is really important because it's a very grave situation, firstly, we have to get the hostages out. They've been held for a very, very long time, and I dread to think that the state they're in. Secondly, we desperately need humanitarian aid into Gaza, but desperately, it's catastrophic. Thirdly, and this is where the leadership piece comes in, we have to find a path to a lasting resolution. That has to be a two-state solution, and we need to show leadership on that. And I know that if we're elected into office, if we're humble enough to serve, that will be my solemn duty.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes, Omar, it's an awful situation, and I'm pleased actually that Keir...
Right, he's just basically repeated like Biden's talking points. There's no leadership to be had there, by the way. There's like, even if the British government came out and, if the British government came out in favour of like, I don't know, stopping arms sales to Israel, perhaps that would have some sort of impact. But there's only really one country that's that counts when it comes to controlling the actions of the Israeli state, and that is, of course, the US imperialists. They're the ones who underwrite it. They're the ones who arm it. They're the ones whose interests are protected by it for now. So whatever the British Prime Minister does is largely irrelevant. So let's get that out of the way first of all. And notice that Keir Starmer, a man who, by the way, at a certain point in his Labour Party career, did speak on pro-boycott, divestment and sanctions platforms. He's forgotten that now, of course. But to go back to what he was saying there, notice he doesn't mention the thousands and thousands of Palestinian hostages held in Israeli jails, including children as young as like 8 or 9, who were detained often for many, many months for throwing a stone at a fucking tank. He doesn't mention them. He doesn't mention in his answer that he just gave there the at least 40,000 people killed by Israel. At least. He doesn't find time for them at all. Because why? Again, let's just reiterate the purpose of the British Prime Minister and we talked about earlier on. His purpose is to, of course, continue the the ability continue to defend the ability of British imperialism to plunder anywhere in the world that it can get away with. Its relationships in the Middle East for the last 100 years have been based upon Zionism, backing for the Zionist project back as early as the 1920s after the Balfour Declaration, then backing the State of Israel after World War II. And it's also based on the continuation of the comprador regimes in places like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and to a certain extent Egypt as well. So that's what the British position in the Middle East is based on. You knock Israel out of that and the other things fall apart quite quickly as well, as the analysis of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine states in their situation analysis that they've done. So his job as British Prime Minister is to defend British imperialism. And to that end, of course, he will back Israel no matter what it does. Now, of course, Biden has given some space for them to say, oh, it's terrible, we should do something. Of course, Biden is engaged in a cynical game, as we've said on this program before, regarding Gaza, which is to make it look as if he's doing something to stop the slaughter of women and children and civilians of all kinds in Gaza. He's trying to make it look as if he's in favor of that stopping, whilst in actual fact doing everything he can to enable it to go further. Because of course, if Israel goes down, which is now looking more and more likely, then the US's position in the Middle East, which is based on a similar set of relationships to the British one, will also be fatally compromised. So these bozos might not understand that, but this is what they're representing. All their bullshit is basically just a way of saying we'll continue to back Israel no matter what it does, until it gets to the point where the continuing to back Israel starts to threaten British and American interests elsewhere in the region and the world. If the scales tip against Israel, at least then at that point, then maybe they will force the Israeli government to do something. But again, the words of the British government are almost irrelevant here. It would only be relevant if they did something like cut off arms sales to Israel or denounced Israel, which they won't do. Neither of these guys are going to do it. Corbyn wouldn't have done it either, by the way.
Starmer supported, alongside me, Israel's right to defend itself in the face of the atrocious...
There we go. Rishi very helpfully has pointed out that Keir Starmer and him are completely agreed on Israel's right to carry out a genocide. Very helpful clarification there, Rishi. Thank you for that. Oh, and by the way, there's no way he didn't understand what he was saying there. He knows that the Tory strategists know very, very well that Labour's in trouble in a lot of, not just the Muslim areas of the country with a large Muslim population, areas with a large Muslim population, but also with a lot of the what I would call the middle-class left base that used to reliably vote Labour. A lot of them are going to do protest votes. A lot of them are going to vote Green. Some of them may even vote for Galloway's Workers' Party. And they'll stay home and they won't vote at all. So by confirming, using his first sentence to say, and Keir Starmer agrees with me, you further paint Starmer into a corner and you undermine him further than he's already undermined himself by reminding everybody that Starmer was fully on board with the siege on Gaza, with the carpet bombing of Gaza, with the usage of starvation as a weapon of war, with cutting off the water to Gaza. All of that he's on record as being in favour of in the immediate days after October the 7th. So Sunak is twisting the knife here, making sure that everybody knows that Starmer and him are on the same page, so that all the stuff he's about to say, he's already got it in the mind of the listening audience that Starmer agrees with him on it. And he's telling the truth for once, because Starmer does.
Attack that they suffered. But right now, you're seeing that US have put a deal on the table, which we strongly support, together with our allies, to bring an immediate end to the hostilities, release hostages, get more aid in, and then build towards a lasting settlement with a two-state solution. We've led in providing more aid to Gaza, something I'm proud that we've done. Our troops have helped build the port that's being established. But more generally, the world is a more uncertain place. What Hamas doing is indicative of the dangers we face, which is why I've made the bold decision also to lead, to increase investment in our country's defence, because I think that's necessary to keep you safe, everyone safe. It's something that the Labour Party have not matched.
Thank you very much for those serious...
Well, it ain't about your safety. But then again, everybody who is watching this knows that. It's about the safety of British investments around the world. That's what he's concerned about. And so he says he's concerned about the actions of Hamas and the other elements of the Palestinian National Liberation Forces. Well, he's concerned about that because he's worried that Israel will be compromised. He's worried that the Arab comprador regimes will be compromised and will possibly fall. And that, again, will threaten the British position in the region, which will basically mean if they lose that, that's fatal for British imperialism. The job of the British Prime Minister is to defend British imperialism first and foremost. Both of these clowns might not understand much, but they understand that.
Considered responses to the first part of Omer's question. You raised a question there very specifically at the end of that statement, Rishi Sunak, raising the question about our security or otherwise under the potential leadership of Keir Starmer. Do you really think the man standing next to you is a threat to our national security?
No, I don't think the Labour Party can be trusted to keep this country as safe as the Conservatives. The world is a more dangerous and uncertain place than at any point since the end of the Cold War. I've made the decision to invest more in our defence, taking it up to 2.5% of GDP. Labour Party have not matched that. And worse than that, the person who would be Deputy Prime Minister under Keir Starmer does not believe in our nuclear deterrent, the ultimate guarantor of our security. So no, you can trust the Conservatives with our country's.
The nuclear deterrent is like a fairy in your garden. If you don't believe in it, it disappears. Again, like ridiculous garbage from all of them, from Sunak. Again, like we've covered the Trident question. We covered it last night. Like Trident, as the old Yes Minister clip makes clear, is to prop up the illusion of British military power. That's why they're both committed to it, by the way. And it doesn't matter what Angela Rayner says. Angela Rayner is facing a potentially difficult challenge from a Workers' Party candidate in her Tameside constituency. So that's why she'll have come out with something about nuclear weapons. She's never going to do away with, she's not going to do away with nuclear weapons. First of all, she's the deputy leader, not the leader, so she's got no power there. And also, Starmer will sack her at the first available opportunity because he fears that she might be a rival for his job. And even if she did get in, even if Angela Rayner did become leader, she'd follow the same policies as Starmer. Because she's as much of a dedicated servant of the British ruling class as Keir Starmer is. She's just slightly better presenting herself because she's got a northwestern, greater Manchester sort of accent. She sounds working class because she's actually from the working class. She's better at waving a finger. She's a better parliamentary performer. She would probably do better in this debate than Starmer has done. That's why he's afraid of her. Not that there's any difference between the two of them, because there aren't. There just aren't any. But again, like, it's just bullshit. It's just garbage. There's nothing to do with the security of you or me if you're in Britain, or this audience who've been watching it at ITV. None of the things that these clowns are talking about, like nuclear weapons, how is that making the audience there or any of us more secure in this country? It's not. It's a con job. It's a con job which is designed to make the rest of the world think that Britannia still rules the waves, when the reality is becoming very much the opposite of that. Very much a diminished imperialist power. And Trident is designed to cover that up. It's not designed to do anything real. It's not designed to increase the security of ours, because they don't believe in the security of you or me or anybody else watching this. They believe in the security of the investments of the British ruling class. That's what they believe in.
Security, and my track record and our commitments prove that.
Keir Starmer.
This is shocking. Before I was a politician, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions. I was working on national security. I was dealing with terrorist plots. One of them that we prosecuted was to take down 7 aeroplanes as they were halfway across the Atlantic. They were going.
Again, Keir starts relating the plot of an episode of 24. Like, I don't take any of this seriously at all. I think he's just making this shit up. I mean, maybe they did arrest a bunch of guys and accuse them of wanting to blow up 7 aeroplanes as they were flying over the Atlantic Ocean. Maybe they got that from, like, what? Somebody's private chat on Facebook? Some, like, MI5 guys were in there going, hey, brothers, do you want to go and do a terrorism? Want to go and hit the infidel really hard this weekend? Tell me if you do. Tell me if you do. Put all the details of the potential plot in there. Don't have the details? Do you agree with these details? And then he writes the details in. Hey, want to go and do that? Oh, you do? Now you're under arrest. This is fucking bullshit. Like, the worst actual terrorist attack that took place on British soil in recent years was, of course, the attack that happened like 20 minutes away from me in the Manchester Evening News Arena at the Ariana Grande concert back in 2017. Who was the guy that did that? He's a guy who'd been given a lift back from fighting in Libya by the Royal Navy. He's a guy whose family were long-term assets of the British security services. That's who carried out the worst actual terrorist attack in this country. A man whose family and himself were assets of the British state. Now, as to what knowledge the British state had of his activities and his plans, well, we don't know that, because the inquiry that was had into the Manchester bombing, where the security services were obliged to give evidence, they did so in secret. But we know that he wouldn't have been able to get back to Britain without the Navy giving him a ride. Is this bozo going to say anything about that? I worked on security. No, you didn't. You were the head performer, the head bureaucrat of the Crown Prosecution Services. And you will, of course, not mention, or perhaps he doesn't even understand, the fact that the biggest sponsors of the kind of terrorism he's babbling on about is the British state and the American state. They're the ones who sponsored the terror gangs in Libya and Syria. And there's more terrorists work directly and indirectly for this country and for the United States than for any other. And they continue to sponsor, by the way, the regime change war in Syria, even though it's run into the ground now, thanks to the actions of the Russians and the Iranians and the Syrians themselves, of course. But they continue to sponsor terrorism in that country, just as they sponsor it in Libya. So don't believe this shit for a second, this fucking plot he's taken from, like, season 4 of 24 or from that Claire Danes knockoff Homeland, which is what he seems to be drawing his inspiration from. This is garbage.
Be blown up. That is one of the cases that I prosecuted, knowing how important it is to keep everybody in this country safe and sound. Imagine what would have happened if those planes had gone down. For the Prime Minister, who was at the time making money betting against the country during the financial crisis, that's what he was doing when I was acting on national security, to now say that somehow national security is safer in his hands is insulting, and it's childish.
OK, thank you. A very brief...
He hasn't said anything, by the way. I mean, it's just like harumphing and like attempts at applause lines which fall flat, by the way. Nobody was impressed by that.
Response to that?
Well, I'd have rather had my job than work for extremists like Abu Qatada and Hizb ut-Tahrir.
The Crown Prosecution Service is an extreme organisation.
No, Abu Qatada and Hizb ut-Tahrir were who you work for as well, so people can Google.
Well, all of these organisations have interesting relationships with the British state, so you're all full of shit.
Google that and have a look.
Honestly,
but there's a clear choice.
Desperate.
I'm investing more in our country's defence, up to 2.5% of GDP.
OK.
You are not doing that.
OK.
So how can you tell people you will keep them safe when you're not willing to invest more in our country's security?
Thank you. We've explored both those positions. I'm just going to draw a breath there. Just once again, we've got a quick-fire question for you from Stephen from West Sussex, who sent us a question and asked, just very quickly, a very brief answer from both of you. Would convicted criminal Donald Trump be someone you, as Prime Minister, would want a special relationship with? Keir Starmer.
If he's elected President of the US, then we will deal with him. It's up to the people in the US to decide who they want as their president. And the special
even if he's a criminal.
The special relationship transcends whoever fills the post of Prime Minister and President, because it's such an important, strong relationship.
Thank you. Rishi Sunak.
Yes, because having a strong relationship with our closest partner and ally in the United States is critical for keeping everyone in our country safe.
Thank you for those brief answers, Rishi.
Well, actual truth. My God. But they actually told the truth there to an extent, because they said that basically it doesn't matter who the Prime Minister is or who the President is, the alliance between British and US imperialism is unbreakable. So basically they told you that it doesn't matter who the fuck you vote for, that policy will never change.
Sunak and Keir Starmer. We're going to go on to another question now, and this one is on the very pressing issue on climate change, and we're going to go to Claire from South London. Hi, Claire.
Thank you.
end this farce now because this is getting so ridiculous. Basically, like, they continue in this vein for another like 20 to 30 minutes. And it's just we are just retreading old turf at this point. But if you want this me to continue doing this, do let me know in the comments, because I worry that the audience is getting bored, basically, because it's just the same shit over and over and over again. But if you want me to continue doing it, going through it, I will do. But it's like, it's a farce. It's like this. You couldn't get more of a clear explanation of they've just admitted that it doesn't matter who the prime minister is and it doesn't matter who the president is. The policy with regard to the relationship with the United States will never change. Okay, there's enthusiasm for a continuation, so we will, in fact, continue.
The world is facing a climate catastrophe now. Both of you are
debatable. By the way, this is somebody who is obviously a core Keir Starmer voter. So let's see what amazing answer he has on that.
broken promises on the environment. What are you doing to put climate at the very centre of your policies?
Question's garbage, by the way. So it's the kind of question that somebody asks and they're thinking that they're sounding intelligent. It's a garbage question. Putting climate at the centre of your policies, what the fuck does that even mean? So somebody who's obviously read The Guardian too much.
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak.
Well, Claire, I have 2 young girls, and this is what they talk to me about more than anything else.
I don't believe that Rishi Sunak actually talks to his own children. I think that men that rich have domestic servants to do that for them. I don't believe that he's had a conversation with his children for at least 3 years. This is a it's always well, I have children and they talk to me about climate change. Meaningless drivel, an attempt at generating emotion, but it will of course fail.
And of course, we're going to tackle climate change and get to net zero. This election is about how we do it.
Right. I don't agree with the whole net zero policy anyway. I think it's bullshit. But he just spent the last 2 weeks saying that he's not going to do net zero. So, like, it's, again, clear and obvious lie. If Starmer had any balls whatsoever, he'd jump on that immediately. But of course he won't.
And I don't think that British people should solve a global problem all by themselves, which is why I'm also prioritising our country's energy security and your bills. We've heard a lot about the cost of living challenges today. So I have made some decisions, bold decisions, that will mean that we can save all of you thousands of pounds, still meet our targets, and we can ensure our country's energy security. The contrast is clear at this election, because Keir Starmer will reverse all of the changes I've made. That's going to cost everyone and you thousands of pounds and make our country less energy secure by banning North Sea energy.
Okay.
And that, I don't think, is the right course for our country.
Rishi Sunak, thank you. Keir Starmer.
This £2,000 he keeps saying it's going to cost is absolute garbage. We won't go into the details of it. But Claire, let me address your point, because this is really important. A transition is coming that's very important when it comes, for example, to energy, a transition to renewables. I don't think we should just see that as a challenge. It's a huge opportunity, because if we go to renewable energy, that means cheaper bills. Renewables are cheaper, not just for the short term, but for the long.
No, they're not, because you can't actually generate enough power off them to actually power the grid. So you need a significant fallback option, be that nuclear or fossil fuels. So, like, Starmer really is dumb. Like, if he believes that he can power the entirety of the UK off renewables, what the fuck does that... has he even considered the practicalities of this? Probably not. But also, like, the Tories did commit to, like, building a new generation of nuclear power stations. But given the horrendous, inefficient nature of British capitalism, it'll probably take fucking years to build, and it'll come in miles and miles over budget. Again, like, British capitalism doesn't like investing unless, of course, all of the costs, all of the are covered for it, and all of the risks are accepted by the state. You know, the ideologists of capitalism like to portray the capitalist system as this bold and buccaneering thing that takes risks and therefore a capitalist deserves huge rewards. British capitalism does not like taking risks, particularly not in Britain, where it's not very profitable to invest. They will only do it if every single cost is underwritten for them and they're guaranteed profits paid for essentially by the state for about 30 years. So everything he's about to tell you about his amazing investment plans, it's all garbage, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm guessing you knew that already.
It gives us energy security, so it means that Putin can't put his boot on our throat, and the result you've all been feeling.
There we go. First, I mean, Putin must be quite disappointed. It's taken quite some time for him to get a name check. But apparently it was Putin that put up all your bills. This is such utter dross. This is such an utter lie. He's gone to the Putin talking point, I think, almost before Rishi Sunak did, which is quite impressive. So, did Putin put up the bills? No, the bills got put up by the privatized energy companies in this country. Why did the bills go up? Well, partially because the British government joined Biden in whacking sanctions on Russian oil and gas and creating a price spike in the international market. That and price gouging by the parasites that own the oil and gas companies and own the domestic energy supply companies that the government has done absolutely nothing to constrain. And even when the wholesale price of gas went down, the price that most consumers are paying did not. So it's not Putin. The problem is here. The problem is parasitism. The problem is the parasitic ruling class in this country, as it is with most of the things that these bozos have been pretending to disagree about for much of the last hour. The problem lies here. Of course, he's going, it's Putin's boot on the throat. Interesting that he went for the boot on the throat thing. I wonder what services Keir Starmer pays for in cellars in London that would lead him to immediately think of a boot going on his throat.
For the last 2 years, but it also gives us the next generation of jobs. Other countries have realised renewables is the future. They're in the race. I want the UK to be in the race. I want us to win the race. When it comes to hydrogen, offshore wind, solar, nuclear, the question I ask is why not?
Thank you very much. That's 45 seconds, Keir Starmer. We're going to try and stick to the rules if we can. There's a very specific point that Claire makes in her question. Both of you have broken your promises on the environment. Will you acknowledge that, right, Rishi Sunak?
No. We're going to stick to the targets we've put in place, but we're going to do it in a way that saves you all money. I'm not going to impose thousands of pounds of costs on you to arbitrarily rip out your boiler, change your car, convert your home. When we've been talking about the cost of living challenges earlier in this debate, I don't think adding thousands of pounds of costs to you is the right thing. Now, Keir Starmer is going to reverse those changes that I made.
Okay,
so everyone is facing thousands of pounds of higher bills. That is the choice that
Let's let Starmer respond to that and address the issue of broken promises. Well, please respond directly to what...
It's hard to respond because he's making up as he goes along. But let me do the best that I can, because the promise I made was clean power by 2030. It's one of my 5 missions, Claire, one of the most important things.
He's got 5 missions. He's got 5 missions. Before that, it was 10 promises. Remember that? Remember when he made 10 promises to the Labour Party members? Said that I will be like a continuity with Jeremy's policies, but I'll deliver it in a professional fashion. Where's that? Where is it? It's gone. The 10th, it's his 5 challenges, or whatever the fuck it is. The next, it'll be like 5 aspirations, then it'll be 2 vague wishes, then it'll be 1 piece of whimsy. And then it'll be, oh, sorry, we didn't do any of it. This is rubbish. This is complete rubbish. Like, the one thing they may well do is they will probably follow through on the nuclear power question, because that's like a big thing that has obviously been identified as a strategic problem for Britain. And why is it the case that Britain fell behind so far in terms of nuclear energy? Used to be, back in the 50s and the 60s, they had a very strong, British government was sponsoring a strong nuclear sector. Well, the motivation for them to invest in it went away. They invested and built it up through the 50s and the 60s, partially because it was connected to the nuclear weapons program. But then they had the idea that they were going to use it to replace coal. And so they were using it to replace coal until, of course, their motivation to do that, which is, of course, to essentially muscle out the miners. And once they destroyed the mining industry in this country, they started buying coal in from South Africa. Then they privatized the nuclear power company, British Nuclear Fuels, and let that go to rack and ruin. So Britain fell behind on nuclear power because, again, the private sector, the great dynamic British private sector, won't fucking invest in these things, because building and maintaining a nuclear power station is something which is very, very expensive, and the returns on it aren't particularly great straight away. So again, the British government is going to have to underwrite the entire costs of building these things. And when they privatized the British Nuclear Fuels, as it was once called, again, the private sector owners who were interested in bidding for it were interested in asset stripping it, not investing anything. So these bozos can like go back and forth all they like. They're trying to defend something which is completely parasitic and past its fucking sell-by date. And these two are the perfect men to front that up.
That I want an incoming Labour government with a driving sense of purpose to achieve clean power by 2030. That's the promise I've made. That's the promise I'll keep. It'll be in our manifesto. It'll be fully costed and fully funded. But the Prime Minister is slowing down on the climate change. The problem with that is not only is that inconsistent with our obligations, it will cost more in the long run.
OK, let
so
Rishi
it's
Sunak
completely
respond
head
to
in
that.
the sand stuff.
Rishi Sunak,
Keir Starmer's going to reverse the changes I made.
Oh.
To install a heat pump now, if you don't need to, costs about £7,000 or £10,000. To convert your home, again, if you're in a terraced house in Darlington, £10,000. Changing your car sooner than America, Canada, Sweden, France, Germany, as he wants you to do, thousands of pounds.
OK, let
There's
Keir
a simple
Starmer
choice
respond
at
to...
this election.
Thank you.
If you think Labour are going to win, start saving.
Let Keir Starmer respond to those specific points. Keir Starmer.
Well, the company that the Prime Minister's been using to try and trail out these figures has done some analysis, which is actually published today, Prime Minister. You obviously haven't seen it. What they say, this is the company he's relying on, is that will cost more, the 2030 plan, if you're with the Prime Minister than with a Labour government. And that's been public. I don't know whether you've been too busy or you perhaps haven't seen it, but the very company that he relies on to trot out these false figures is actually saying it's more expensive with the Conservatives than with Labour. Now, I would like him just to answer that.
Rishi Sunak,
anyone can go online when they get home. Go and see how much it will cost to convert your home. Go and see how much it will cost to install the heat pump. Go and see how much it will cost to change your car. Those are all the things that he's going to force you to do sooner than is necessary. You can go and see tonight the thousands of pounds that's going to cost you. I said it before, I'll say it again. He is going to put up your taxes, put up your bills as clear as night follows day.
I'm going to just return very briefly to Claire's question. She's talking about a climate catastrophe now. What are you doing to put climate at the very centre of your policies? Very briefly.
I want to set up Great British Energy. This is a publicly owned company that will generate energy, that will have investment alongside it. It'll be owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer and drive us to renewables so that we can have lower bills, secure energy and the jobs of the future. I also think that we should insulate our houses because I think people are paying far too much in their bills. And, and that was a project that was started 10 years ago. And
right, let's just deal with this thing about Great British Energy. Great British Energy, this a fucking stupid idea that they've come up with. Basically, he's making it look as if he's starting a state-run energy company. He's not. The Great British Energy thing is basically going to be a state company which hands out money to companies which say they're going to set up more renewable energy firms. That's what it's going to do. So it's a way of the state handing out more money to a parasitic private sector. That's what this is all about. It is by 2030. I mean, if you believe that, you would have to have had a fucking nail driven through your brain. That's such a stupid assertion that he's made there. And Sunak wins again because he's just able to point out the incredible stupidity in this like consumerist energy plan that Starmer has, because there are people in the Labour Party who talk about forcing people to buy an electric car. We're going to get you all to install a heat pump. Don't worry, it's all going to reduce costs. They've never presented any real serious analysis that it will reduce costs, as he's saying. And his great plan is just to hand more money over to the private sector, which has proven to be completely incapable of even updating the energy infrastructure in this country, and he's only interested in gouging the consumer. So he's got nothing here. And I mean, the woman's question's dumb anyway, climate cult bullshit. But like, he's not even answering it convincingly in the terms of in terms that would win her over. It's just like driveling on about nothing. And all Sunak has to point out is your plans will cost people more. Yeah, his will too. But like, he's pretending more convincingly that it won't. This is dog shit. It's awful.
Cancelled under the Conservatives when they said cut the green crap. We've lost 10 years. I'd get on with it and get your bills down because people are fed up with energy bills that have gone through the roof.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We've got another question.
Notice no applause line. No applause lines for the only applause lines he's got is when he had more of a slight go over the NHS. So when he's doing these, he's trying to do these zingers at the end of his contributions, and it's just falling completely flat every single time. Not only is that he's a poor performer, it's that his policies are garbage and everybody can see it. Like, Sunak's strategy is working. He's played his cards much better.
Important question from Miles from Ilford for both of you. Now, hey, Miles.
Thank you. Like many young people, I completed my final years of sixth form under COVID restrictions, started university under them, and I've had to deal with a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, and an unstable world. What future can you offer my generation, and when will we become your priority?
Thank you.
Well, I can answer Miles's question for him. You're not the priority of any of them. Not of either of these clowns, and you're never going to be the priority if you're from the working class, or even from large sections of the middle class, to be completely honest. Life for the next generation is going to get inexorably worse under either of these two bozos, because British capitalism's on the fucking slide. British imperialism is a power that is waning, and they're going to pass the costs on to the working class, as they always do. There is, of course, a future for this country and a future for not just the next generation, but, all the generations that are currently around. But that only comes via the fight for socialism. Doesn't come through voting for these fucking tossers. Doesn't come through engaging with this system, which you can see now. I'm glad we continue with this, because the longer it goes on, the more this just comes across for what it is, which is fake. Everything they are saying to you is fake. Everything they are telling you is a solution is a lie. Every single initiative they're talking about just involves handing over more and more state funds to the same collection of parasites. But let's see what these great men have in store for the lad that's asking this question. Let's see if they can reassure him that his place in Britain is secure, that he can take his place under the sun and be a wonderful subject of the empire as we march forward into a bold new dawn. Let's see if they've got any of that.
Thank you very much indeed. Keir Starmer.
Well, Miles, what I think is really important is that you have the further education opportunities that you need, whether that's university or technical skills. I think either are perfectly, they're equivalent, they're really important.
Miles has the opportunity, just like many others do, to go into a gigantic amount of debt to get a shit degree that no one will take seriously. Bet you're glad you're in Britain.
My dad was a toolmaker, so he went down the skills route. I was the first, as it happens, in my...
His dad owned the factory. His dad was a small business owner. Again, don't fall for the fake proletarian origin story.
A family to go to university. So we would ensure that those jobs are there for you for the future, that you have the opportunity to get on. We'll build the houses so you don't have to be, 30-something, 35, 36 before you own a house under this government. But what I won't be doing,
Why is owning a house a good thing? I mean, a lot of people want to do it. I understand it. It's something which is sold to you. But under Keir Starmer's plan and Rishi Sunak's plans, house building in this country remains in the hands of the private sector. One of the key drivers of the, shall we say, the sugar rush British economy that's been built up over the last 40-odd years is the housing bubble. They will continue to inflate a housing bubble, which is what makes housing completely unaffordable. The only way you bring housing costs down is by increasing the amounts of housing that is actually not put into the private sector. So you go back to building council housing, or you would say public housing in the United States. You take housing, to quote Xi Jinping, you take housing out from being a commodity and to have it as a service for people. Have people be able to live decently in a council-owned property which they can pay a reasonable rent for in order to maintain it. That's how you solve the housing crisis. You don't solve the housing crisis by allowing property developers to build overpriced shit housing, which is, by the way, all the flats I've ever lived in were overpriced pieces of shit thrown up by property developers to turn a quick buck, which fall to pieces within about 10 years. That's Keir Starmer's plan. Build more of that. It's also Rishi Sunak's plan, because neither of these two fucking arseholes wants to pop the housing bubble. Neither of them wants to do anything to actually lower the costs. If you actually lower the costs, it means a hit to the profits of the property developers and the banks and the fucking buy-to-let landlords. And those are groups that neither of these two want to offend in any way.
Doing is sending your national service some sort of teenage dad's army, which would be what the Prime Minister would say, forget going on to...
I'm sure the 18-year-old in the crowd loved that Dad's Army reference. I'm sure they all got that. Great up-to-the-minute humour there, Keir. If you're not a funny man by nature, here's a piece of advice. Don't make jokes. Don't try it. If you're not relatable by your nature, if you're not the kind of person who can do banter, don't try and fucking do it. It comes across like nails on a fucking chalkboard. It's like watching David Brent at work, only worse.
University wants to send you off to do national service.
Thank you very much, Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak.
You know, we have an enormous amount to be proud of as a country, but we do need to do more to make sure our young people, like you, Miles, get the opportunities that they deserve. So that's why we will introduce a modern form of national service. And I think it's going to be transformational for young people in our country, giving them the skills, opportunities they need to stick in life, fostering a culture of service in our society, bringing it together, but also strengthening our resilience and security for the future. And I think it's incredibly positive. I want you financial security. So when you get that job, when you save for that house, we make it easier, which is why I want to keep cutting your taxes so you can keep more of your money, build for a deposit for that first house, and not still you with £2,000 of higher taxes.
Thank you very much indeed, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer called the national service proposals a teenage dad's army. What would you say to that, Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, I think
tell him why you don't think it's that.
Yeah, whatever.
Just to say, the whole national service thing is like, it's bullshit. It's like complete fucking garbage. It's a gimmick. If you examine the actual problems in the British military, calling up like 100,000 people a year, if indeed it ever comes to pass, isn't going to solve any of them. The problems are deep-rooted in the fact that they can't replace the equipment. They can't build new stuff as quickly as like the Russians would wipe it out. It's a bullshit gimmick. And so the one thing that Starmer is halfway correct about is that it is a gimmick. The real policy of both him and Sunak is to continue to throw billions into the Trident system, which is a giant waste of money, as we've talked about before. But it makes everybody believe that Britain's still in the top tier, militarily speaking. Because to actually address all the problems which even British generals admit exist would take a gigantic amount of money and a massive investment in industrial production in this country, which they don't want to do. They'd rather write a big check for Trident, and to quote the great Nigel Hawthorne, then nobody has to worry about it anymore. The fantasy is continued. The ruling class in this country is in fantasy island. They are all lost in a fantasy, in a dream state. We are the ones who are part of their nightmare.
You might think of it, it is an idea that's transformational for our society.
Well, the army don't like it.
But Keir Starmer, all he can do is sneer at it. Sneer at it because you don't have any ideas for the future. You don't have anything that's bold, that's going to transform our country for the better. And in fact, everywhere I've been, since I've made the announcement, I've had people talking to me about how they think it will be wonderful for their children, how they think it will change our country for the better, and it's an example of the...
That is also a lie, by the way. I'm willing to, because Rishi Sunak does not go to unscripted encounters. He will go and meet with Conservative Party councillors and carefully selected Conservative Party supporters who will tell him, yes, Rishi, we think it's a wonderful idea. And he'll be going, oh, that's good. And then that's it. Neither of these two bozos is going to risk an encounter with ordinary people. They're not. All the people they meet, every encounter they have, will be carefully controlled. Nobody wants a moment like old Gordon Brown had in 2010 when he got asked an awkward question on immigration by a woman who I believe was up in Oldham, just up the road from me, and got caught on a hot mic in the car afterwards saying, oh, she was a bigoted woman. And it was part of what killed his campaign. These two exist in hermetically sealed environments. Reality will not intrude. So whatever anecdotes he wants to drop, if they're not completely made up, it'll be something that was said to him by like a Conservative Party activist. We continue.
Bold action that I'm prepared to take to do things differently to deliver a more secure future. You don't have big ideas like that.
They've been in power for 14 years. And after 14 years, with a few weeks to go before the election, they come out with this desperate idea. It was such a brilliant idea. Why for 14 years has your government not lifted a finger to do it? It's a desperate attempt. Now the election's being called to get some attention to put something on the table. The other thing I would say is this. It is very important, Miles, is that the money the Prime Minister says he's going to use for this national service, he's going to take away from levelling up. Remember that promise in 2019, we're going to level up? Well, now he's going to use the money for national service, and the army say, and the military say, this isn't going to help us because we don't have the wherewithal to train people, and it'll take away from our own budget.
Rishi Sunak to respond.
It's not thought through, it's not sensible, it's desperate.
Could you respond very specifically on those points?
Actually, having spoken to lots of people from the armed forces, they're very supportive of the plan, and they think it will do brilliant for them over time to attract people into the armed forces. And actually, the money that we spend on levelling up is partly spent spreading skills and opportunities for young people. And I think this is the best way to do it. But again, you've had 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, but you have nothing to say about it, and all you can do is talk about the past. And it's clear, there are no big ideas here. If we want to transform our country for the better and deliver a secure future, you've got to have leaders who are prepared to do big, bold things.
Rishi Sunak saying you're stuck in the past, Keir Starmer.
On the one hand, he says these are all the big ideas that Keir Starmer's coming up with, and they'll cost a fortune. Then he says he hasn't got any big ideas. I do appreciate why he doesn't want to talk about the last 14 years. He's ashamed of the last 14 years. He's not said tonight in this debate one thing saying, this is our proud record, vote for me because we've got a great record. He can't say that. He can't say vote for Conservatives because we've got great leaders, burnt through 5 Prime Ministers. So all he can do is say, please look at the future. Please don't look at what we've done in the last 14 years.
Thank you.
We cannot have 5 more years of this. Got to draw a line. We've got to turn a page and start
Thank you very much.
Okay,
and Miles is listening very patiently to all of this, and I want to root this in his question, whatever the to and fro on that issue may have been between the two of you. You're both homeowners. The most common living arrangement.
In the case of Rishi Sunak, several homes.
For 18 to 34-year-olds is living with their parents. Do the young need to change their expectations of home ownership now? Do we have to be realistic about this? The young people of this country deserve some honesty. Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, it is too hard to own your own home, and I want everyone to feel what I experienced when I got the keys to my first flat, because it's a very special feeling, and we need to make it easier. And that's why we've delivered 1 million homes in this Parliament, and we'll keep building homes in the right place, but not concreting over the countryside as Labour would do. But crucially, we need to make it easy for you to save for that deposit. And that's why I want your hard work to be rewarded. I don't think we should be taxing you more, because that's just going to make it even harder for you to get on the property ladder.
Thank you. Keir Starmer, on this specific point.
I think what you raise is really important, because for young people, the dream of home ownership has all but gone. The average age for owning a home now, Miles, is late 30s. That's shocking, because I know what your own roof over your head means for an individual. It meant the world to me when I was growing up. So we will build 1.5 million homes. Picking a number requires a plan. And if those homes are going to be built, we're going to have to change the planning laws to make sure we can get on with it. We're going to have to make sure our mayors and combined authorities have the powers they need to put the homes in the places. And we need to make sure the amenities are there, the schools, the health clubs, etc., to support those homes. So we've got to clear plan to deliver on the homes that will make sure, Miles, that you get that chance for the dream far earlier than you do under this failed government.
All right, thank you very much indeed. There was so much that was in the question from Miles. Thank you very much indeed for that. And we're just going to come now to a final quick-fire question. It's been a pretty serious...
Well, I noticed that they didn't go back to Miles or indeed any of the other questioners to actually hear their opinions on what had been said. But judging from the guy's face, he wasn't impressed, and I don't blame him either. Stand by for the awkward banter question, by the way.
Evening in terms of what we've discussed so far. Just to both of you, apparently there is another big contest on this summer. For many, it's the biggest contest, and that is, of course, the Euros. We know you're both football fans. You are not the only leaders under pressure to win, and sometimes accused of not being exciting enough. So here, slightly with my tongue in cheek, if you'll forgive me, both of you, is a question that we've literally just had in from Gareth, who's on his way to Germany. What is the best leadership approach? Play it safe or take some risks and go for the win? What would be your leadership style? Rishi Sunak, quickly.
Well, not to give advice to Gareth Southgate, who, when I met him, we did discuss who had the worst job in Britain in terms of other people giving you their opinions. But I say you need to have a clear plan and you need to take bold action because you don't do anything without those things.
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer, briefly.
Game plan, good squad, and he's got both of those. I really think England are going to do really well this year. He's got a fantastic team, and I'm really...
Do you be radical or do you play it safe?
Sorry? You need a strategy for winning, so it depends who you're playing, what the issue is. That's what Gareth does. He's very, very good at this, and he's built a squad.
OK.
And just like I've got a brilliant shadow cabinet.
OK, thank you very much, gentlemen, for both.
Well, and there is the end. It ended with the cringe banter fest. And just to answer the point from CJ on Twitter, this is indeed live. So that brings us to the end. They ended appropriately on a moment of low cringe where two men who I'm willing to bet have never actually watched 90 minutes of football in their lives had to try and pretend that they were football fans, because this is what you have to do. You have to pretend that you like the things that normal people like. Neither of them do, of course. Rishi Sunak probably, I think he is legitimately a cricket fan. I've seen him talk about that before in a way that implies that he actually understands the game. I believe that Keir Starmer was given a list of talking points by his advisors to say, look, Keir, you've got to look as if you're good at football banter. Here you go. Here's some talking points. He couldn't even deliver it. He's like, oh, it's a good team, solid defence, great shadow cabinet. At least Sunak kept it short and fucking sweet. He tried to do banter, and like, oh my god, did he get that scripted by James fucking Corden? Jesus Christ! Well, so it ended appropriately on a moment where of low and pathetic cringe from Starmer. So thank you to all, by the way, 544 of you who are watching this at the moment. I'm glad you could join me for this particularly horrendous endeavour. So let's just sum up. Sunak won, not because he actually proposes anything that will make life for the great majority of people in this country any better. He doesn't stand for that, and he won't do anything like that. He has two lines of attack that he keeps coming back to: that Starmer has no plan, that Starmer will raise taxes, that he is getting things under control, and he's the guy with the answers. I'm going to get immigration under control. Again, we've already covered why that's a lie. I'm going to take decisive action on, on taxes, on, inflation. I'm going to make you better off. He will make you worse off. He will put your taxes up. Did I say that he's going to put your taxes up? He's going to put your taxes up. By the way, of course, as we covered during this long stream we've done here, they're both going to put taxes up, no matter which of them gets in. The tax burden on the working class and the middle class will go up because it always does, because they want to keep the tax burden away from the richest, of course. That's who gets defended. And the tax burden keeps going up and up and up because they're trying to maintain the state machine and trying to maintain certain things when, of course, the the performance of British capitalism is decreasing over time. So it costs more to keep things going. And that's why the burden gets passed on to the working class. This is all part, of course, of the class war. And so Starmer loses because, to quote a very old phrase, he's a reformist without reforms. He offers absolutely nothing of any significance whatsoever. And not only that, the nothing that he is offering was poorly delivered. And he tried for applause lines, couldn't do it. Sunak walked all over him over and over again. Labour Party people are on Twitter today complaining that the moderator was biased. Perhaps she was. But the fact is, he let Sunak keep talking all over him. He never had a convincing comeback to the tax question, because he knows he's going to have to put up taxes. Sunak is going to have to as well, but Sunak lied better, which is what fundamentally something like this is all about. It's not about putting out a real debate that will inform and educate the population. It's about giving these two the opportunity to lie. And Sunak is the better and more aggressive liar. And that's why he won. Starmer is now a real pickle. He's in a real spot of bother because he's been found out as wooden and unconvincing. All the things he tried as lines of attack didn't work. Sunak has zeroed in on some clear points that he's going to go back to over and over again. Their Tories, now that they've come through this first debate, not only unscathed but strengthened from it, are going to hammer the tax thing. They're going to hammer the immigration thing. They're going to accuse Starmer of being a dithering and indecisive weakling who can't make up his mind. And the thing is, on that third point, they have a lot of validity to that point. There's a lot of evidence that Starmer has provided. His performance in this debate was abysmal. He keeps saying, oh, he's had 14 years, but Sunak had a good comeback to that. He says, well, you've had 14 years to think of something to say, and you've got nothing, because he's not got anything. Because it doesn't really matter if Labour win or not, because, again, the ruling class, or at least a faction of them, and the bourgeois intelligentsia in this country would prefer Labour, and they want Labour because they want the Labour Party to take Britain back into the EU. That's the big mission that Keir Starmer has been given. But I made this comparison last night. Keir Starmer is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was elevated by a section of the US ruling class who are looking to invest in a new Obama. And they thought, they're basically, these people are incredibly shallow and stupid, so they thought, well, I don't know, she's black, kind of. She can sort of, that'll win us a lot of votes. The last guy was black. She's a woman, so that kind of like covers the Hillary thing. So we'll put, and she was a prosecutor, so she's got to be, clever. Same calculation made with him, only it's a lumpy white guy. They've looked at him and thought, well, he's a dedicated servant of the state machine, so he'll do what we fucking tell him. So we'll put this guy up. We'll put this guy in charge. That'll work. Doesn't, does it? Because much like Kamala Harris, and unlike Kamala, who, as Zuleika points out in the chat, is a drunk, so is at least funny, Keir Starmer has all the personality of a piece of balsa wood. And they're trying to answer the point that DBLTH raises in the chat. The polling is what's known as push polling. You do push polling when you commission a poll, whether it's about politics or about a consumer product or whatever, and you want to attain a certain result. You structure the questions in the poll in a certain way. You make sure the poll is conducted in a certain area which will give you, in terms of a political opinion poll, the result you desire. So if you want to publish polls which say that Labour are 20 points ahead and the Tories are fucked, then you go to areas that are reliably going to vote Labour. You then pick a sample of voters and ask them, well, are you going to vote Labour or Tory? And then, 40% of that particular sample says they're going to vote Labour. But where are you getting the sample from? What's the methodology you're using to construct the poll? Again, opinion polls aren't really there to tell you what people actually think. Some of them are. You can actually do an opinion poll and get a pretty good idea of how people are going to vote, but that's not what these polls are all about. They are there to convince you that Keir Starmer is going to win an overwhelming victory. Well, look at that performance. Does that look like a convincing performer to you, even just as a bourgeois politician? No. So there is no enthusiasm for Labour. There is no enthusiasm for him. And this performance is only going to make things worse. The more they will see of him, the less they will want to vote for him. I'm convinced that the judgment that myself and many others have reached, which is we're heading towards a hung parliament or a Labour minority government, is probably the one that will come true. I would laugh my arse off if Starmer didn't even win in the case of a minority government. But his performance here, what he will do the next time he has to do one of these, and I need to find out when the next one is. What he will do is he'll try and be more aggressive. That's the thing that he will take from this is like, no, you've got to talk over Sunak. You've got to talk more. You've got to amp yourself up, Keir. Here, do a line. Zelensky left you a sample before going on there, Keir. Get fucking mad. And he'll try it, and you know what it'll be like? It'll be like Jeb Bush in 2016. Do you remember Jeb Bush when he was trying to look like a tough guy against Donald Trump? And Trump just kept talking and going, little Jeb Bush, so pathetic, so pathetic. His brother did 9/11. Jeb can't even do 9/11, but his brother did. Jeb, when he was like clearly been told by the spin doctors, look, Jeb, look, you gotta get in there, man. You gotta get in there. You gotta give it to him, Jeb. Come on, you're tough. Come on, Jeb. Think of how you felt when your mom killed that puppy in front of you. And then Jeb went on stage and went, hey, I'm talking here. I'm talking here. And he just looked pathetic. That's what Starmer's going to do next time. And it's going to look terrible, and it's going to flop, and his poll numbers are going to get worse. So, that's the end of our stream for today. I hope that you've at least enjoyed it. There's 544 of you watching, so thank you to everybody who's tuned in. The audio for this will be up on the Patreon later today when I get the chance to sit down and do some editing, so I'll be getting on that soon. Thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and also via Buy Me a Coffee. This show is possible because of your support, and I thank each and every one of you. Join me again for the program tomorrow, which will be a little bit different. We'll be looking at the next part of the works of Joseph Stalin entitled On the Opposition, and I hope you can join me for that as well. But until tomorrow, I bid you good afternoon and don't have nightmares.